What's going on, everybody? This is Brandon, and this is part 2 of our 3-part series with Gray and Non-Official Cover, or Nox Spy. We truly appreciate you guys tuning in to us as we uncover more of Gray's story on behavioral modification programs, psionic assets, satanic ritual abuse, and the global plot for absolute control. As always, we bring you these things because we want you to know what's out there, what evil the world can hold, and we know you have a desire for these interesting conversations just like us. And as with any of our guests, we do not necessarily adopt or support all opinions and our ideas, but we know that you have the right to hear and the right to discern. Part 2 will take you deeper into Gray's world, and we're heading towards our Part 3 grand finale that I know will blow your mind because it blew our mind. And we just want to say again that viewer discretion is advised. Please take into consideration that we have a whole library of other content that may be more for you. If these sorts of dark conversations on terrible things that go on in our world that affect people that are innocent in ways that you can't imagine are too much, that's okay. But these conversations deserve to be heard. These conversations deserve to be had. And we truly appreciate you guys being along with us for the ride. Are you saying essentially that in the United States that there is an army of people that are just waiting to be activated to carry out this order to go after people, and it could happen like at the drop of a hat, and then they just execute whatever this mission is? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, in the event, for example, if a major fault line goes, right? If a major fault line goes and already creates some stuff, or in the event of a civil war, right? Or in the event of, already other massive attacks to where it has to operate if like a bunch of people that came in from the southern border, start doing terrorist attacks here in a response, they may do something. There is a sleeper force set up by the globalists, and it's linked up to what is called the Pentagon's secret army. Okay, now you can pull that up, Pentagon's secret army. Now they euphemistically call it signature reduction. And it mentions that some are civilians, some are within the military, some are stationed abroad, some are stationed
If you find something, pull it up like screen share it, TJ. Feel free.
Yeah, they got a Newsweek article from a while ago, but so it says some 60,000 people. Yeah.
The largest undercover force the world has ever known is one created by the Pentagon over the past decade. Some 60,000 people now belong to this secret army, many working under masked identities and in low profile, all part of a broad program called Signature Reduction.
Welcome back, everybody, to part 2. I am ready. Gray, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
I know this is going to be intense. I'm here for it.
Absolutely.
The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, sir. So last time, we started off just me going through the train wreck, messy wreck of a life that it was from my childhood all the way up until 2014 when I was released and got my record fixed and all that, where I start firing back off. So, if you remember, when I was explaining how I basically got locked up in solitary confinement, max 23-1, for a total of 14 months, did a total of 28 months at that point, but, 14 of them in a 7x9 box, right? So, during that time, I was able to really face everything. I completely had lost my ego, lost all the fortune that I had, everything, my relationships, found out that I had basically been tricked and used, so on and so forth. So it was just devastating, but allowed me to break down and really get past some of this. I also thought I was looking at life in prison because they had some federal agents come and we're talking about 30 years. There was a bunch going on. So, it wasn't looking good. So basically, those boxes got ticked, and, if you want to call it deprogram or whatever it is, I had these disassociated, personalities, parts, heavily reintegrate, okay? So going back through, let's give context to this. This is what I ended up remembering, the whole other side of myself, and another layer of what was going on whenever I was missing time, funny things were going on. So here's really, what was going on here. Like I said, my initial programming was with my grandfather, and, it got to the point where he was, warning about believers, and was warning that, he had one foot in the grave, one on a banana peel, right, so on and so forth. So now when we say believers, I'm not talking about like God or Jesus. What I'm talking about is these are believers They are Luciferians, okay? And that's not just, Lucifer is our guy, right? Like, no, this is basically, another religious system. This is like the one new world religion kind of that's covertly being pushed, that's framed as science. So what it is, it's a lot of these high level people that would technically be it. Like you hear like Parsons, right, and Hubbard and all them, they're Thelemists, OTO, stuff like that. You got the Golden Dawn, all this. You're going for, a lot of these use what's called Enochian magic and stuff like this, Enochian language. And this is Luciferian, okay? The Mayans, their whole ritual set and belief system, Luciferians, okay? Back in the Babylonian times, right? The Babylonians, Egyptian mystery, right? Luciferian. That's technically what this would be. A lot of people say, oh, this is satanic, this is that, this is that. There's a lot of different people, a lot of these terms have got watered down, but I'm just, if I refer to it will be Luciferian, okay? Which is a very dualistic, based on science and, principles and the age-old secrets that are being passed down a lot, kind of like we talked on the Invisible College and just, mouth to mouth, passed down in parables, passed down in tales, right? Remembered, through interesting storytelling that tells more than one lesson at the same time, overlapping, and kind of, uses odd characteristics sometimes even, which is basically mnemonic tricks to help, right? So this was going on with my grandfather at the very beginning up until 4. At the same time, was going to the daycare at the Jehovah's Witness church where these things were going on, okay? Now, at the church also was my aunt on my grandfather's side and my other uncle-in-law that got married, okay? Now, basically, through paperclip and all that, whenever the Nazi scientists and so on and so forth came over, if y'all are familiar, with this SS, with these groups, they were heavy into the occult, right? And a lot of these occult practices, going back, it's always went hand in hand with the world of intelligence and clandestine activity, okay? The spying, the setting up, right? All the dirty, rotten tricks, if you will. A lot of this is actually formulated here. And if you go way back in history, even to the dynasties, they'd have their seers and they would have their advisors, right? And all this. So, I don't have all the details, but at some point, my grandfather realized, okay, he was okay with the high risk, high reward mentality. His son's in NASCAR, right? He comes out the war. He understands by any means necessary. But apparently he got wind of some of these people really believed in some of these darker practices. He was not partaking in these darker ritualistic practices. He was doing the manual torture and this and that. And it was his understanding that this was ultimately going to make me a better soldier, a better spy, a better, fuller, more developed person, had to overcome serious adversity, from young. If you just like a dog, if you don't train it from day one, well, the people that have the advantage that are going to have a meaner, stronger dog, right? It's just, that's what it boils down to. So he found out about this, at the same time as I had mentioned that, whenever it had came up, after church one day where they had talked about the molestation and everything, I called him my grandpa. Basically my family convinced me not to do this. So at this point, I'm unhappy with my grandpa. I'm unhappy with my family. And this is when I was introduced to my next door neighbors who were also in the same, then we'll just sum it up as like OSS network that turned CIA, that turned into, basically operational subgroups that, unite the, the NSA, the CIA, the aspects of the FBI, et cetera, these operational subgroups that had their people in different places kind of to unite some of these separated, compartmentalized powers, right? So at that point, they had basically convinced me that, yeah, we're going to get retribution, and to this day, of course, it's hard to tell the truth, but there was, ritualistic means to take revenge. My grandfather ended up having, a heart attack and passing, right?
I remember.
Yes. So they were taking him out of the game completely because he had found out, basically that these people are believers and was clearly disillusioned, okay? And once that starts with anybody, you never know what they're going to do where, right? So, at that point, someone has to go. They're in the network, they're a threat. his partner with the logging company was also in the network and kind of took over the whole logging company. There was even like a case to try to get like some funds back from it from my family with them, and that case was squashed. So anyways, when my grandfather gets eliminated out of this, go into the pages, okay? Again, this is still going on. I'm about 4 now, and this was still going on with the daycare at the Jehovah's Witness Church, right? Again, where my family is in these groups. So I had mentioned that they would have certain abuse and they would have certain films, or the room would be colored with a certain color light, and they'd be using shapes, pre-verbal sort of cues, right? So this is, think Pavlov, right? So what's happening is they are constantly, there'll be one type of, there's a few brands of abuse, right? You have a sexual abuse, you have physical abuse, and then you have other abuse such as like spinning, and we'll get more into this because this is an important one.
Okay.
So they will be doing one type of abuse, and say there'll always be a color, say there'll always be blue. When they do this type of abuse, say you'll always see a square. It could be a circle, could be a triangle, could be an X, but anyways, the point is that they work repetitively reinforcing certain types of abuse with certain colors and certain shapes, okay? So this was getting conditioned in, and this is the process, okay? Now, people that are found, either if they work for the network directly, or if it's like just a random freelance pedophile that is abusing kids, they will have the people come in, bust them and blackmail them, and they will even teach them aspects of this that are compartmentalized. They won't get the full book of knowledge, but they'll be like, okay, you can do what you're doing, but you need to do it like this. And look, it makes sure the kid won't tell, and it's a little bit more effective. And like basically, this is how you make a sex slave, right? For example, to the pedos. For example, there's other brands of this, but there's a method to the madness, right? You have spin torture, which is essentially just spinning at high speeds eventually, and once it overcomes your like equilibrium, like the vestibular of your ear. I don't know all the proper terms for this, but the point is that it's one of the most useful, easy ways to do no-mark brainwashing, no-mark torture. Okay.
Okay.
Even in the research, people can look into it. The person that made this chair, I'm trying to remember had the same last name of the evolution guy, but either way, I think it was Gowan. Might not have been Gowan. Either way, Darwin. Okay, so the chairs. The spinning chairs dates back to early psychiatry, and it's like super effective. Okay, it turned into what's called like the Bahraini chair, like that like the Air Force uses, even, right, where they spin and check like how much you can keep your senses. But like, I mean, the history of it, which people can look into, is like heavily used for brainwashing. It would make people compliant, very compliant. So spin programming is one of the main things here, and that also correlates to the reason why the spiral symbology is always used in things. That's actually relating to spin programming. That's like the big secret that these people use. It's one of the main things, and comes into play later.
Kind of like the black and white cartoon spinny thing that we put on like Looney Tunes on the TV, right? When the cartoon characters would get hypnotized, that kind of what comes to mind.
Sure. And yeah, that can be part of it. Like obviously that can help you get help you get hypnotized and stuff, but specifically I'm talking about being put in a rotary chair.
Yeah, physically. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So anyways, and you see like, the pedo symbols, like it's got like triangles with the spiral circles, different things like that. Yeah, that's what this is. That's spin programming. This is the big secret. It's like the top brainwashing method that's used, okay? And then it's used to different places because the people will subconsciously like identify with it and kind of be pulled there from their programming. Like it's a whole sick thing. It's constant reinforcement. These are people that are masters at using, subconscious cues, right? So anyways, so basically, I'm kind of had certain abuse embedded in, and this is what happens with everybody to, whether it be spinning, whether it be certain colors and shapes, okay? This is the sort of information that's passed on in the network, okay? Now, with the morticians.
Word of mouth, right?
Yeah, especially, yeah.
Okay.
But, some of this is written down, and there is, some stuff you can pull up on spin program.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
So anyways, getting there with the morticians, that happens to eliminate the grandfather. already at this point. Basically, they had took my father out of the picture, and he was handicapped from that questionable surgery and just kind of kept him busy. And they kept him basically on a string, looking after a music career that he wanted. And he had like one song, and stuff like that. So at the same time, they kept my mother busy too. And they already had kids, but, they kept them strung along. Okay. Now, the thing is that I also had another uncle who I mentioned that was at the school as a coach, as a bus monitor, as a like handyman, maintenance man, groundkeeper, right? And his wife, my aunt-in-law, was a bus driver too, right on our little area. So this was an extremely contained area, okay? Now, they also knew the morticians, and they also knew another man that was heavily involved with this, Dick Van Dusen, who is now passed. They lived right behind my property on a property called 88 acres that was given from a land grant from the Queen. He had a botanical garden, okay, and they were harvesting, things like nightshades, making scopolamine and so on and so forth. Are you familiar with what scopolamine is?
No, I was about to ask you what scopolamine is.
So it's called scopolamine. It's also known as devil's breath, burundanga. It is a concoction that's made. It was made famous, I think, in like Colombia because they used it to rob people and stuff. But essentially, it's like the zombie drug. If you dose it right, people will lose their memory depending on the dose from anywhere 24 to 72 hours. And it's like right when you take it will be the middle of it. You'll lose some before and after. And it makes people super compliant. Basically puts people in a trance where it's super suggestible and they will do what you say. It's very scary stuff. If you look into it, it's one of these things that have been used, for covert means for a long time. They call it devil's breath too, because if depending on the dose, it'll make your breath horrible. But yeah, so okay. it is the thing. NASA even has it in an aerosol form, okay, and like in light doses, it can be used for certain things. It's just like motion sickness and stuff. But NASA ties in with stuff. We'll get to that. So, anyways, they had their little group. This was one of the groups. Some of them came over from Paperclip, right? And then some of them were already there in generational. And these were people, Brotherhood of the Snake, Brotherhood of the Serpent, Order of Quetzalcoatl. We're talking about, Brotherhood of the Dragon, okay? There's kind of two main factions here, okay? You have the Dragon Societies, okay, which is Dragon Snake. And then you have you have the kind of Christian, Jesuit, Catholic, societies as well, Sovereign Order of Malta, all these, right? So you have these two kind of groups, okay? And this is going to come heavy in a little while. Anyways, this group that was operating in upstate New York, they were heavy occult practitioners, believers, okay? Thus, they eliminated my grandfather. My uncle was actually into this stuff. And my uncle was a junior to my grandfather's senior, or he might have been a third. Yeah, he was actually the third already.
Okay.
So anyways, and as a firstborn son, they ended up kind of getting him away from his own father. Like, me and my family lived with my grandfather, but his firstborn son that was named after him lived separate and kind of took it over, and he had a position in the cult. My grandfather was not involved with that. He wasn't a believer, and I don't know if they ever tried to pull him in or what. Maybe they did, and that's how he knew about it, right? But so he was kind of like warning us about that. They eliminated him. I'm also going places with my uncle, going with the morticians, and they essentially have already crossed my loyalty over to them. This is very important because the whole thing is they don't want, people that have to fight all the time. They want an abused kid coming from a broken home where they can fully, it's attachment manipulation. They want to fully be able to, get the loyalty, right? And since they allowed me, to enact retribution, or at least believe I did, and they were allowing me different things I wasn't allowed as a Jehovah's Witness, whether it be hanging out, watching, media, or, having candy, right? Even they were giving me all that. So at that point, my loyalty, even as young as 4 or 5, my loyalty was away from my parents. Everything. It was all in on these people. Okay. And, of course, Stockholm Syndrome comes in with this and everything. It's just, that's how it is. Now, this mirrors, this is the whole operation, in a big way, because, there's third-party groups that are doing this to people everywhere. And say, for example, you'll have, a motorcycle club, there's a lot of crossover with special forces and military intelligence in some of these motorcycle clubs, right? Say, hey, we got this kid, he comes from a bad place, y'all watch out for him. So
Right.
they might kind of get along, help him here and there, teach him this, to kind of take him under their wing. If the kid, if they look at him like a father figure, they'll idolize him. And it's not hard to be like, hey, practice this 10,000 times. Yeah, here, come by the dojo, and then, and this and that. And just so basically it's attachment manipulation, and they take full advantage of that. So now getting to the necromancy and these techniques, okay? Now, I'm going to give this straight information here. Like this, a lot of things that I say, these are things most people will not talk about. And it even hurts me to this day to talk about these things. I have rebuked this and denounced it a long time ago, but, it still hurts.
In your context, can you define what necromancy is to you?
Sure. Necromancy, in my context, is divination and just occult path working, okay? Occult path working used as a means to an end, to develop oneself essentially into godhood. The ultimate goal of Saturnian necromancy, okay, is apotheosis. To basically, these people believe if they hack their faculties right through just the most heinous stuff, it breaks you down, builds you back up into something more than man. That's what these people are after. They're after power.
Does any of this ever involve psychedelics or anything like that?
Absolutely, yes. And I did briefly mention, even during these rituals, they would give psychedelics while we did these invocations, and they would, there would be visions and all sorts of feeling. Is it placebo? Is it not? I'm not going to argue with people. If people to hear this need to say, okay, he's completely brainwashed and still confused, that's fine. I'm going to talk like it's real, for the sake of explaining.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Because this is what these people do, and a lot of this is coming out already anyways once we bridge to UAP stuff. So, I had explained that their main base programming thing, and this goes for all assets, okay? Now, in these brainwashing programs, not all as extreme as what I went through. The base of this isn't just the abuse with a color or a shape, right? It isn't just the spinning. The whole basis of this is almost always done with the lesser key of Solomon. You have 72 Goetias, you have 72 seals, okay? And what these correspond with, as I explained, they stimulate the five senses, different scents, different sounds, different visions, lining up at the same frequency, different sins to, basically you're luring something, cosmic fisherman, and, you're making a lure from all the different stuff to attract something, okay? Now, what this does is essentially keys to the mind. What this does is it basically represents taking control of different parts of the brain, okay? In a child young enough, stopping the integration process, and then basically equivalent to what Dabrowski explains, who is someone involved with a gifted and talented education and what's called positive disintegration. That's basically stopping the brain from forming naturally as it does as one ages, interrupting it, and then building it with a smarter pattern, right? For as a means to an end. So it's basically nowadays in scientific terms would be Dabrowski's positive disintegration, and then rebuilding up through 5 phases, to basically complete it. And if this process doesn't get completed, you're left without it all the way rebuilt, and people will not be functional. A lot of people that went through a failed version of this, unfortunately, end up in bad places, whether homeless or mental institutions or whatever. So anyways, that is the whole basis of this. And the other thing is that this is where it links up, as I explained, in these rituals and stuff, and you can see this in the theatric rituals, even of some Masons and stuff. And I'm not claiming all Masons are bad, just to be clear. But you will see these people are used to theatrical ceremonies and theatrical rituals, okay? And basically, as they go up the steps, right, you're going up the pyramid, you're learning new knowledge, stair-stepping it. And these people get good at reenacting these plays and whatnot. Well, with this knowledge, is basically this knowledge at the top level is used, once you have a child that's through these rituals, right, and they have been broken down and have these compartments that go according to colors, that go according to certain cues and things like that. Basically, at that point, they will be under the spell, okay, and you'll be able to make them do what you want. Now, in military intelligence terms, they are a sleeper asset that can be activated. Okay, if you're a stage hypnotist, you have these people under a trance and post hypnotic suggestion, right? If someone says, okay, when you hear the bell, you're going to cluck like a chicken, you won't remember your name, whatever. It's basically dark neuroscience. You have to understand. So forget all the magic or anything like that. Just like if you do the invocation, when you're repeating these things to yourself and stating you're going to get the power and stating all this, you get yourself in self-hypnosis or in hypnosis, in a trance, and then the power of suggestion will stick with you, okay? And so like this sort of thing is used in basic practice. Yeah, it might be a little bit more of an extreme setting or a different theme, but whether you're going to a clinical hypnotist, right, whether you're doing this dark occult rituals, right, or just like watching a video online that's like hypnotize yourself to stop smoking cigarettes, right, will you accept that suggestion or not? That's what this comes down to, because the mind has unlimited power. You take some psychedelics, you'll have an experience, and the extreme experience and trauma is a catalyst for serious change. Sometimes it shocks the system, and while the system's shocked, you're dazed from, all the stimuli and everything in the subconscious is way more suggestible.
Right.
The other thing about disassociation is that it's hereditary, okay? And with that, so is suggestibility. About 30% of the population is what would be technically considered highly suggestible, but then this subgroup of people that are getting programmed are typically even more. So, it's one of the reasons things get pulled into genealogy and like this, other than the family dynasty stuff being used kind of like a private company to escape accountability and kind of weaving things through dynasties. It's also all about the suggestibility. I was going to ask you
about bloodlines and twinning. Is that kind of what you're talking about here?
So yeah, well, twinning can be used in a few different ways, but yeah, I mean, it's all about bloodlines, and the main reason for that is because epigenetics. Talents get passed down, but so do the desirable traits such as dissociative ability and suggestibility, which go hand in hand also with intelligence. These, because it has to do with the imagination, right? So.
Gotcha.
Because it doesn't matter if a kid believes in Santa Claus or if the kid believes he has invoked a demon, right? You are what you believe, to an extent, obviously. But so anyways, this is happening. And while this is all happening, my uncle is also kind of throwing like swinger sex parties, right? Even though, so while this is all happening, there's people, there's some kind of high-profile people from around the town. They were plugged in with people. I believe one was Congressman Solomon, and then there's just tons of people. Like these were the people, and there was heavy overlap with people that were actually in the cult. We'll just call it the cult. Brotherhood of the Dragon, whatever you want to call it. So these people were a lot of overlap with the cult. At these sex parties, right, the parents would be busy, blah, 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 depending. Sometimes there would be a separate area where the kids were being watched. More of the same. Now, let me explain how this ties in so heavy. Okay. You hear about Epstein's ring, right? And Nygaard and all these people. So this isn't just sick pedophiles getting their rocks off. And it's also not just blackmail, but you hear about this blackmail, okay? So these are layered actions. Anytime they can get more to kill two birds with one stone, kill three birds with one stone, that's the point here. So what actually happens at these kind of sex parties and things like this, some people get blackmailed, but at the same time, that child, possible future asset, or at least an asset then too, will also at least be attempted to being trained, okay? And, they might have a variety of tasks such as you need to remember this, you need to report this, you need to tell us this about whatever they can. They'll be getting trained, okay, because they're constantly being fielded to see if they can be more useful and progress up the ladder. If a child's not trainable or is failing, that most likely would make the child expendable, unless if he was like a bloodline heavy in and the family had a position, obviously, like if they can and the child's not usable, it makes them expendable. There's some circumstances where just due to relations or a wide variety of variables that they wouldn't be, but that's how it goes. Now, it's not just about people getting blackmailed with this. It's not just about, children being trained. It's also some of these people, specifically the VIPs, are actually using the experience, right? Say they go in there and have experience with this child. Well, guess what? At that point, if they are in the fold high enough, they will receive, okay, you want to have the blue room with the squares, okay, right? And they go through that, and they might have a certain phrase as well. It's always layered, so this stuff doesn't happen accidentally. But what they will do is trauma bond with that child and may establish a relationship, just like you bond with a dog if you're going to be a handler, right?
Sure.
Whether it's trained and it gets handed off to you, you learn the commands, so on and so forth. So they actually trauma bond with the child, so later in the field, they can have a direct handler connection and tap that resource to activate them as needed, okay? Depending if it's an after party, it may just be that, this happens at the ritual. It may be with the sex act. But the bottom line is that there is bonding, with these assets to the handlers. And that's what ties in big time with the VIP network. It's not all about them getting the rocks off. Sometimes this is just a means to an end in order for them to establish that relationship. Okay? And it's understood by people that utilize this, even if they're not believers, that, hey, this is just the way it happens. And the reason being is that this is dark neuroscience and it's effective. And the other reason being that, hey, we do it in this context. So if the kid remembers and talks about it, they seem crazy, right? But in reality, this is one of the dark occult secrets, okay? So the kids being trained for this, people are bonding with handlers, blackmail, everything is going on here, right? Anything they can do. Rooms all bugged up, the whole nine, right? Okay. So anyways, that's going on. Back with the morticians. We're going to skip past more of this like occult stuff, but like part of this, just recall, is an out-of-body experience. And, with these disassociated parts, they also attempt to teach people basically astral travel. They repeatedly induce near-death experiences, and they repeatedly, torture and trauma to rise above, not only disassociate, but attempt to leave the body and control that. And it's and essentially through all this ritualistic stuff and everything like, and all these psychedelic journeys, because, they'll be blasting you with DMT and all this stuff. Whatever it is, basically desensitizing you to getting used to navigating in these extreme spaces where you may lose your body. Like someone has one near-death experience, and you might be like, oh my God, rose above my body. I was like just watching the situation. I could hear everything. Like it was the craziest, most experience of my life. But someone that's done that 10 times, I'd be like, I know what to do and where to go. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So like,
Practicing.
and they're looking for astral reconnaissance, whatever you want to call this. It's all about recon. Now, can people do that? Can they not? Like that's what they're going for. People know about Stargate. People know about, remote viewing, all this, there's different methods and there's validity to it. Okay. This has been going on for a long, long time. And, it's just one of those things. If you go look, and you'll find out that remote viewing, astral travel, things like this are true. There's dangers to it, just like with anything else. Okay.
These agencies you're talking about have practiced with this, and they've written about it. These things have been declassified and published. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Precisely. So, anyways, now that's happening with the morticians. I'm simultaneously then went to school, moved past the daycare, going to school, going through GATE and all this. During this time, just after this, there was actually a scandal with Gifted and Talented Education Act. And what they did was they posted in the newspaper, "Gifted and talented curriculum raises concerns." And it described basically the Gateway Voyage, the Monroe Institute. They were fielding kids for these things and testing them, right? That was the program I was in. It was where this was reported was Hillsborough, New Jersey. This was talking about the Odyssey program specifically.
Okay.
But it completely matched the Monroe Institute, okay? And this was all funded by Jacob Javits, the Jacob Javits Gifted and Talented Education Act. Now, a lesser known fact is that Jacob Javits was one of the top people in MK Ultra, okay? And that's a New York senator, Jacob Javits as well.
What year are we talking about, like, time frame wise?
The article that came out after I was out. It came out in '97, and I have that article. I've posted it too. But this happened to me in 92 to 94 because I was kindergarten, first and second.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah. So, anyways, now I'm in Gate, and they're pulling me into this program where they're testing me for Stargate, all this, right? So, here's what's going on with that. You have this group, okay? The Dragons, right? The Dragon Societies, okay? And this is what the Morticians were. They were linked up with globalists, right? From World War II, paperclip Nazis, scientists, SS, right? And then they were linked up with some people here when it came over who had obviously went into the rocket programs, had went into, Disney, Lockheed Martin, eventually just all this, all the MK Ultra doctors and stuff. They had linked up with that. So by this time, there was a lot of time elapsed, obviously, in generations, because now we're in, 92 to 94. What they were doing, though, is the people that prepare this, keep in mind, this whole time, what's happening is this is a clandestine program in order to, make a clandestine deep cover asset eventually. And the people that run this everywhere are OGs in the industry that, have come up with the method. And you'll look at this, it's like usually the groups that are contracted to do this, such as Abraxas Group, specifically. Because if you look up Abraxas, who Cubic Corporation bought, Abraxas was formed right after September 11th, and they handled the deep cover clandestine contracts, okay?
Gotcha.
So the Cubic Corp has all the training game-based stuff, okay? They've been proven to be involved with schools through DARPA's Engage program, okay? And so Cubic was involved through DARPA's Engage program, and that's, kids all the way up through STEM and everything, and essentially using game-based learning to develop systems for soldiers eventually, but it's obviously also for training. So you have Cubic, who makes this game-based learning that is used in K through 12 programs on the record through DARPA's Engage, and then they acquire Abraxas, who is making deep cover. It has deep cover contracts to make, for Knox. So it's like, okay, from A to Z. So you have the industry OGs doing this. So these people that were with, the Dragon Society, they had been contracted out, whether it's motorcycle clubs, whether these people specifically, the third party, this happened to be these generational morticians, and then this paperclip group, Dick Van Dusen with the Botanical Garden, whose family also has Van Dusen Botanical Garden in Canada, by the way, but all these people. So what was happening was they knew that they were going to insert me into these other programs that were more on the books, okay? So, as it's kind of known now through GATE, what they were doing is they were testing kids for basic psychic ability and then putting them through these programs, and that's coming out more and more now. So they essentially... I was a plant, they knew I was going to get into there, and they were preparing me for it with all this occult path working to develop the psyche, to teach me tricks, who knows what other strings they pulled. And then the thing was, as I was already literally a mind-controlled asset, they knew eventually wherever I go, they will have a back door to access that, and then I'm their mole in this thing. So they're about to hand me over to a strictly U.S. program, but these are globalists that are doing the early conditioning for these assets that they can insert and route where they want, where maybe they don't have a tentacle, okay? Okay. So I get pulled into this program.
Sense.
Yeah, I get pulled into this program, and, things happen. And eventually at this point, as we went over on my 8th birthday, there was an event, and essentially and I'm not holding back here. It is what it is. But have you all heard of? Are you all familiar with this UAP psionic asset stuff now? And you hear about them trying to summon craft?
I have, yes. Actually, I've seen quite a bit about that. There are people that put classes out there and videos on YouTube telling people how to use lasers and stuff. I've seen that to attract craft and for people to have interactions with them. And I've seen people talk about like good and then like very negative interactions as well.
Sure. There's a variety of modalities. You got Greer CE5. You have, you hear like Barber and them talking about summoning an egg, right? Well, if you go back and you look at like Parsons, if you look at Crowley, if you look at this, they were talking about the egg a long time ago too. So here's the thing is like the people that are gifted in this, as far as I know, and I'm very plugged in on this, 100% have been through this occult pathworking where one of the requirements early on isn't just specific development, but that it's also binding, ritual invocation, a pre-connection with this whatever else is out there, and essentially what they will do is in this black magic sort of situation, age old, it has been about using children to commune. Children as a channeling, as a conduit to commune with other things, okay? And there's many reasons for this, but this has been age old that they use children for this, okay? So, and part of the thing as well is it gets really sick, but these people, you hear about them drinking blood for adrenochrome and all this. Well, the science behind some of this, when you get to some of this, isn't just about, torturing them so they have adrenaline and then you drink and get the adrenaline blood. What some of these people believe from divination is that if you drink the blood while someone is passing, it's almost as like, have you heard if you get like a transplant and people will like have like felt stuff from the donor or had like weird changes, connections.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
They
memories. Claim that they have weird, memories.
Yeah,
exactly.
memories. Yeah.
Yes. So, and because cellular is cellular, whatever. So, well, the thing is here is that they drink the blood while something is passing, and they believe there's like quantum connection, and they kind of peer into that dimension as the blood and as this person passes, and kind of crosses over. They have some of that in their system and believe it gives them a connection. Okay. These people make concoctions where it's some of the pituitary gland, some of the pineal gland, and some of the lung tissue. And these are parts that have like a high DMT concentrate as well. This is post-mortem, obviously, but they essentially juice the pituitary and pineal gland and the lung tissue and then turn this into a concoction as well. Side note, they actually end up mixing this with what's known as monoatomic gold and to form what's known as ormus. Some people think ormus is just, which is called exotic material. Some people think ormus is just monoatomic gold. It's monoatomic gold mixed with juiced pineal, pituitary, and lung tissue. And this is kind of like a tonic that they believe boosts their psychic powers. Right?
Where are they getting, or is monoatomic gold, it's the first time I've heard that term, is this like something that you can make synthetically, or is this something that you have to like find?
No, so you can pull this up, and people sell all sorts of it. I don't know the quality, like I'm not about to mess with this, but no, it's something. I don't know if it's gold particles suspended, kind of like how you got colloidal silver is like micro silver particles. It's something. It's basically like that.
Okay.
So anyways, they had attempted to use me as a conduit in an experiment, okay? And it was the most ridiculous shit ever. It was basically an age-old ritual that the Mayans did, that the Babylonians did, that all these people do. It was at an eclipse, and they essentially, through ritual trauma, got me to have an out-of-body experience, a near-death experience, which I had already been trained in because they had constantly tortured the shit out of me and essentially, tried to get me to go into the eclipse while I astral traveled. Now, the thing about eclipses is that eclipses have been proven to bend space-time. In May of 1919, Einstein's theory of general relativity was actually proven because stars around the eclipse were displaced during the eclipse measurably. And then this proved Einstein's theory of general relativity, okay, that space-time can bend around eclipses. Another interesting fact about certain eclipses is that as they will start or end, a 6-point star will shine. Okay, and really, if you kind of look up into this occult, you have Merkaba, right? You have like the Jewish star, or some people call it Star of Remphan, all this. But, it's essentially like transcendence, space-time vehicle travel, a vehicle for ascension of, just all this. So it's kind of interesting, the lore for these divination rituals. This was followed especially by what's known as the Dresden Codex, which is a Mayan codex that kept track of rituals, kept track of, eclipses, and basically the whole astronomical cycle. So they basically retried this age-old eclipse fucking ritual divination shit, right? Trying to send out of body through a space-time bending shit.
Isn't Merkaba another name for like Ezekiel's wheel?
I think it's closely related. It might also be, yes. But Ezekiel's wheel is one thing, but it's all closely related, yeah. Okay. But it's just interesting that Merkaba is that tetrahedron, that 6-point star, which shines during an eclipse. And during eclipses have been proven to bend space-time. So divination being like see the future, like it's interesting how there's like some space-time bending. And it's like, okay, so the ritual trauma in these rituals was basically forcing to go out of body, and interact with this shit. Just like all the other, things that I had experienced with these real rituals and hallucinogens and trauma, there's a crazy experience and it fucked me up, right?
Yeah. And I'm sorry to ask you, can you explain what the Dresden Codex is exactly? I know that didn't that have something to do with like ancient Mayan cultures and like finally being able to understand some of their artwork and things like that, or maybe their language, or am I mistaken?
No, well, a lot of that. So Dresden Codex is like, I think one of the main codex, or like the most recent one we have that's not entirely destroyed, and it has their eclipse tracking tables where it keeps tracks of all the eclipses, and it's also their schedule for certain rituals and their schedule for different gods, and there'd be different rituals at different times to different gods, and like it just depends. They have they had a complicated belief system, huh?
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. I said what you just said almost sounds like a ritual calendar.
It is, yes. That's what it has. It has a ritual calendar. It has the eclipse tables. It had basically it kept track of like the moon cycles, the rituals, and the eclipses, and related. And it had like, I think the whole thing hasn't been translated, but there's tons of stuff on the Dresden Codex.
Gotcha. Okay.
So funny thing is the Codex, the town that this took place was like right above where I lived, and it was also named Dresden, right? And then they have
Ironic.
and they have a place where this stuff and where a lot of this witchcraft and what you call it would go on was Black Mountain there, and it's interesting. So, anyways, this all happened. When this happened, this is when I had said I was pulled out of school. When this happened, I was badly injured. I developed twitches. I actually stopped growing after this because they fucked me up so bad. And there was also like radiation blasting and torture. Like it was a horrible thing. They basically did some psychic experiment ritual, and they were also like recording, I guess, the brain waves of what it went through. Like they were doing psychic testing in one of these Stargate related programs, and it went horrible. This is when I was pulled out of school, and my family got the settlement check, and we ended up moving to New York. The settlement check, just to be clear, was supposedly for my dad's back surgery that he finally got and everything. There's more to it. The last part of this is, and I think I had mentioned that I had won the science fair right before this.
Yes,
and
you did. Yeah.
And had went through D.C. and had a bonding situation to D.C. Yeah. And fun fact, I won, but then handed over first, right? It was a PVC sniper rifle that shot marbles and was powered from apple cider vinegar and baking soda. They wouldn't let you make that nowadays.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. So anyways, so this weird shit, and so the globalists had entered me in, the Dragon Society entered me in, this shit, and I ended up getting pulled into this crazy ass psychic test and shit, fucked me up. Boom. Now I'm in New York. Okay. At the same time, I had told you too that the mortician faked fucking killing his own wife, right? And told me he had to go on the run. He would always be watching, he prays that I don't make the mistakes she made, and basically like at that point I knew like I've got to do whatever these people say. I was thoroughly convinced. I had seen their power, seen that they were linked up with, DC and high society. And, like I had been shown different things at that point that like, I believe they had all the power in the world. I thought they controlled spirits and demons. Like, like they had me completely brainwashed, terrified. Right. So this happens. Right. And when that happened, he also, gave me a passcode that if anybody tells me, I'll know that he sent them. Okay. Got it. So this happened, the bullshit with school, them moving now to New York with the family. Okay. Moved to New York. Like I said, my family immediately split up. Later, I was briefed that I had mentioned my father got hooked on crack cocaine. They had been lured out there with promises of a music career and so on and so forth. And through a friend that had a limo business that had limos for, for all these people, right? For some of these high society people. And anyways, we're luring him in through like talent agencies and all this. They supposedly, whether this is true or not, supposedly deliberately got him hooked on crack and orchestrated the breakup of my family so they could have a tighter grip on my family. Okay. So my dad's out of the picture completely as soon as we get to New York. And then, the same people had then basically, through limo company, through other stuff, had walked my mom into becoming an escort and kind of going back to her old type of business that she used to do. Okay. So at that point, again, my father's out of the picture. My mother was an asset for these people. And basically,
you're just an easy target.
Started doing that thing. And you have to understand, it's like, so how could a mother do this to the child, blah, blah, blah. How could a father? Well, they took my father out of the picture and would routinely drug them if there was ever a thing. Otherwise, just kept them preoccupied. But the thing about it is my mother had been through conditioning, like I said, her father, my other grandfather, was a war veteran, came back. There was people from her temple. She was Jewish. The people from her temple would come over and do this weird stuff. She didn't know what it meant, but they had brainwashed her too. Now, when you go through this, you don't just have an alternate personality. You have to understand, these people have displayed to you that they have a network and that they can do whatever they want and not get caught. She 100% believed that if she was not compliant, that they would make it worse. The same would happen, but only worse. And possibly they would kill her and then completely take me over. You see what I'm saying? And it wasn't just me, obviously. But so that's the whole thing, is like they don't have a choice and they thoroughly don't see a way out of this, And if they go to the police, if they have something to tell the police or can actually muster up like a credible, statement in the middle of all this, how do they know the police isn't compromised? They might have a guy there, they might not. But if they're caught trying to tell on this, it's over. And I mean, there have been demonstrations at rituals where, again, like people are skinned alive and, things like this, like Jesus. The most gruesome, heinous example that you'll ever see. And I want to be clear, while these examples are happening too, it's not like they're not wasting and like killing people left and right. No, they'll make sure that, that there's a group of people in a very controlled situation and that they display the meaning of life if they ever have to take it. Like it's still sacred to them, but it's like the mission is a priority and you have to understand how serious it is. And when they're doing these examples, it's like everybody knows the rule. If the one who's performing this ritual, knows that if they break the rules that, they'll be the first to go. Like no one's above the rules of this. This is a generational plan that's bigger than any one person. And it's automatic, right? Retaliation for, breaking the rules, penalty for breaking the rules is automatic. There's no discussion. It has to happen. And if the next person doesn't enact that retaliation, the penalty for what's happened, the next person that it falls on, which is usually the own people's family, by the way, then they're up for it too. It goes down the line. So you know what I'm saying? So it's like, and
guaranteeing compliance.
And it only gets worse as you go. Okay. So like if the person if I'm under someone's charge and I get a penalty and they don't handle it, then it's on them and they get penalized. And then it keeps on going, and it only gets worse. And the people know, I've just got to do this penalty. Otherwise, it's going to be worse because of me. And there's no reason for more and more and more people to get hurt, right? And the Stockholm Syndrome from the beginning, just, brainwashing and plus you see these people have power. It's not that the power's not real, because these people clearly can pull strings, okay? So anyways, now what happens as soon as that, when my dad's out of the picture, and they're pulling my mom back into that, and I'm going to the Jewish Community Center, which is right across the street, right?
Yeah.
That's when I was introduced to Coach Sean Connolly, who was Naval Intelligence. And then this man that was with the one group of friends I had there, this man that was their mom's boyfriend at the time, he was a Marine Intelligence. I don't know exactly what he was, but this is when they kind of were taking me under their wing. I was already a little shit getting into things. They were very careful this whole time. They were not believers. Those men were with the network, but they weren't family or believers, right? So they had been instructed, right, with some of my information. And when I met them, they had brought up this password, this passcode, and like other cues of programming. Okay, so what happens was, like, you work this in with them. It doesn't have to be like a big thing where you're like, okay, blue square, blah, blah, blah. Here's the passcode. Then I'm like, oh, yes, I know he sent you, blah, 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 blah. No. What was happening was this triggered my subconscious. Back then I didn't remember. This triggered my subconscious, and like I automatically knew I could trust them because these deep suggestions and this deep trauma was so ingrained deep in me that like a part of me was just like, oh, it was attachment manipulation. Since they tapped into that part that was so loyal and all this, just subconsciously, like, it made me trust them, made me look up to them.
Put you in comfort.
On top of all the like already kind of looking up to them because they were like guys and cool for what I thought was cool, and So anyways, like I was breaking into little houses and stuff like that. I was, I told you I was getting groomed online about hacking and the credit cards and all that. They weren't the ones that had me doing that. They were the ones that say, if you're going to do that, here's how to not get caught. So they were cleaning me up and steering me and giving me pointers, but not actually like, here, do the Leos. You see what I'm saying? Like, technically they were clean. It's very sketchy. But so there was always a line, and they didn't know the dark. Let me put this way. They had no idea who the morticians were or anything. They knew that they were supposed to look out for a kid. They were part of their own little group, right? And I didn't know they were all connected either, by the way, but I found out later. But yeah, so they basically just were like, hey, this kid's coming in town. He comes from this, y'all look out for him, put him through the paces. You know what I'm saying? Look out for him, right? So basically they were looking out for me, knew that, oh yeah, they're looking at him. He's good for it. Once he gets older, he's gonna, be in the clandestine services, right? This whole time I'm talking about a spy, movie spy, right? Wanted to grow up to be a spy. We're talking about clandestine deep cover, stereotypical CIA, even if, like just what the movies say, So anyways, all this is happening, and I'm going to the JCC, and I meet the coach. I had told you I was going to they made that new school that I was going into, right? And where I would go in by myself and do the cubic, okay? Now, to be clear, the way that I had got hooked up with this was they had like this new passcode and everything. And it had like biometric and all this. But what they also had was you could just do a code, I guess, as a backup or whatever like that. Like it had the code too. So like, like he did a thing one time where he was showing me the new equipment and took me in there and even set up like a guest profile on it, because you have to set up profiles on it. And it even had like Rosetta Stone too. It had like all sorts of stuff, right? It was just like a learning, it was a top of line learning thing for their alphabet school. So, but what he did was like, hey, don't watch me when I do this, and like made it so I watched him, right? And then like made sure to mention like the specific times, and like basically gave me all the information and set up to where I was to go there whenever the JCC wasn't open, a certain thing. It was away from the main compound, near the street over the fence. So he essentially had me breaking in there and going completely of my own accord. Okay. So like even that, he was kind of clean for its setup. Okay. A part I had skipped over, but it's relevant, is across the street the other way was Percy Warner Park. And there was an area there, an amphitheater, okay? And I have posted this, like with the skeleton there and everything like that, but there has been law enforcement confirmation of rituals taking place there, okay?
Was this a human skeleton?
No. They would never leave a human skeleton behind. No. But
just
there was
asking.
like some deer skeleton there. Yeah. But
left over
it was
from a ritual.
Yeah, it was a site, and they have things to where, like, you know, there was also, they had a hidden cabin there that was not on the map, of an Eagle Scout cabin tied in with state, right? All this, and you got Order of the Arrow, the funnel assets through. But so yeah, so, and you know, the Boy Scouts, you know, 80,000, you know, victims, and like, you know, however many $1 billion lawsuit, and they just restructured it. But so this, while this whole time was going to, like, you know, again, you know, there's still occultists, and while this is all going on, it's constant reinforcement of the trauma and this and that. But there was a ritual grounds there, and this cabin that they would use out there. You know, they would have police, whether it be park ranger or whatever. People also hooked up with the Masons. They weren't all complicit, but they might say like, hey, you know, they're having, you know, the sleepover, you know, campfire Boy Scout thing. If you hear some people yelling or something, we're telling a scary story, so don't stress it. You know, things like this. Or they might say like, hey, you know, my daughter's boyfriend, like, you know, smoking weed in the park or something. It's like, hey, they're going to be there. Y'all go scare those kids, you know, something like that. But like, so they basically, you know, there's little ways to have people check on stuff, you know, and all that. But like, so these areas would be patrolled, make sure everything was cleaned out. Whenever they were doing rituals, even back then, like, you know, we're talking about sweeps and then jammers. Like, you know, they don't do this unless if it's a sterile protocol, meaning that like, if they're not 100% set up with the perimeter secure, right? Sweeping for stray frequencies and then putting up things that like even would block out recording, you know, they're not doing it. Like, these are consummate professionals, okay? Like, you know, this isn't just like random backyard occultists or anything like this. Like, these are people that do, you know, that are like OGs in the clandestine world, you know? So it's no joke. So anyways, moving forward from there, you know, like I said, I went to, was pulled in and out of school, went to the Huntsville Space Camp, you know, after I had completed all the cubic stuff. Huntsville Space Camp, essentially, like, they had this area where it was like mimicked cockpits of different things, and like one was inflatable tent, one was just a thing, and it was basically like more training with that. And what they did again was the spin programming, because they had the not just the chair, but the one that like spins all the way around, and they'd crank it up in there super fast. And like, that would kind of be like a checkpoint, and they would do that and just embed it super deep, you know? So, you know, then they had some other apparatus that was essentially like a super tech Skinner box, which is like a sealed environment that you retain, like learn better in. Okay. And essentially, like, yeah, they would like, you know, it would be like, for example, something like Rosetta Stone, but it would be hooked up. You'd be hooked up to it. It's like a helmet. It would be stimulating parts of your brain. And like, you know, I already had good memory, but you would retain what's in it. And it would be like feeding information, almost like a download, which people experience downloads and stuff, you know, from some of this equipment, but like, it's literally like, basically they pattern messages and feed it into your brain while stimulating the part that receives and remembers. You know, it's just like high end, you know, behavioral neuroscience. Yeah. And this is like real. You look up and you'll see tidbits of it, but like, you know, obviously they don't try to advertise how well they can do this, but it's essentially a new age Skinner box. So anyways, you know, going through this, I told you my mother got hooked up with public relations and advertising executive through her escorting right after she had won that bodybuilding championship, Corey Everson, right? So anyways, you know, right when we get to him, what had happened was I moved out to the rich part, Franklin, and he introduced me to this new intelligence agent, right? You know, and then what happened shortly after this was that there was a huge ordeal to where his office was broke into and they stole his laptop. Now, you know, he was freaking out, and it was unforgettable because he was freaking out because he had told me that he thinks someone pretended to be a utility guy and came in through the ceiling, but all they stole was his laptop. And like, this guy, you know, had like expensive equipment in there. He even had like a CD automatically duplicating machine, which back in the day, you know, I'm sure was crazy expensive. Like, you know, he had some things in there, all sorts of like demo high-end stuff, like Audio-Technica, Korg, like all this shit, right? So it's like, oh, they stole his laptop. Like, what the fuck's going on? And this guy's the son of like a master, you know, clinical hypnotist from Long Island, and like, you know, deep ties there if you look. And if you look at like the psychiatrists on Long Island, like, you know, Milton Klein, you know, that's for another time, but like, you'll see how deep it gets. So anyways, you know, he was like a master at public relations, you know, and dealing with the people, right, developing the connections and all this. So anyways, he's freaked out about the laptop getting mixed, right? That was the intelligence agent that he had met. And on the laptop was codes, right? Access codes, the information for assets like myself. Because by that time, they had structured, you know, certain access codes, post-hypnotic activation triggers, right? You know, and so on and so forth, because this is a science. And essentially, you know, these people, the main thing that they build inside is essentially an internal PC, right? And certain stuff's password protected. There's certain back doors to get in. There's all sorts of stuff. Like, that's the thing, is someone's divided and split up into multiple personalities, multiple compartments, so they can get programmed like a computer. Like, that's really what this breaks down to. And there's a very specific way to manipulate them. You know, typically people want some occult experience, some hypnosis experience, and some like real world people experience. Okay. So anyways, you know, at that point, you know, that was the access codes and all that, and he has that taken from him, okay? That was also right after I had started growing marijuana and got some money, and then, you know, went and was out, then started like going out with my friends and starting, you know, other grow houses and stuff like that, right?
Gotcha.
Okay. You know, so at that point, you know, getting to the part where that intelligence agent also, like, you know, had been telling me like certain things, like, you know, it was one of those things where it's like, you know, hey, I know you're up to some stuff. You know, I don't want to know about it, but do this, right? Like, how not to get caught. Like, okay, for example, you know, never talked about like, oh, hey, I know 100% you're growing marijuana, but he did give me advice that like, hey, if you were going to do something like, for example, like grow marijuana, he's like, you should look up the laws and see how they're structured. And if like, you know you're not going to go over a certain weight, but you know, your plants are taking you into the your next felony class category, he's like, well, just grow less bigger plants and then rotate them. You won't lose any time, and you know, you'll be having a lower class felony. He's like, then instead of getting, and then like, you know, you can do it in different counties. He's like, look at how the laws are structured. It's like to where it will actually be concurrent if you get these at the same time, you know, so on and so forth. So he's teaching me that. Like I said too, you know, he had taught me about classified ads, about how in the classified ads, sometimes, you know, people communicate in that. And there's a reason. We'll get to it shortly, but classified ads, it goes much deeper than that. I think the reason for him showing me this, this is a little bit of, you know, assumptions here too, but, you know, he had me looking through them, watching them just like for fun to see if I could pick up any messages where other people are communicating, like, because I'm like so into this, and like, oh, really? Like, oh, I bet they're talking to each other. Let me see if I can find one. And he would tell me different things, like, you know, there's different ciphers and different sort of things, but then there's also like key ways to look at it if something looks funny. You know, sometimes like in the exotic pets section, there would be stuff. They're just, you know, there's a wide range of things, right? So anyways, I'm looking through that, you know, and it gets to the point, you know, I'm going through all these things, skipping through some of this. There was one last time that I hadn't mentioned that's very relevant, but through going in and out of school, the last time wasn't in 8th grade that I said, where we went back to DC and went to the morgue, right? I got pulled out of 8th for that too, though. I went to 9th grade for just a few weeks. When I went to 9th grade, it was at somewhere called Middle College, which was Nashville State Tech. It was on the college campus. And, you know, I was smart, so I tested up. Even though I was like out of school more than not at that point, right? I had tested up. So I was in a class with one other person, and we would walk from the campus to the nearby library, just for our special class that was called Contemporary Issues. And what happened was that building turned into the 325th PSYOPs. I guess that's what it is now. So anyways, 9/11 happened. And as soon as 9/11 happened, I was at school when it happened, and I had a kind of freak out and just decided to leave school again. I like cussed out one of my teachers or something, and then like they just pulled me out. And that was the last time I ever went to school, right after 9/11 happened, okay? And that was kind of coinciding with dude's laptop getting stolen, and me going out and starting to, you know, get other places with my friends to grow marijuana. Okay. So that happens. Now we're at the part where eventually when I'm 17, I wake up in the middle of a wreck, you know, all this. What had been going on this whole time is, through all of this, my alternate personality, right? had actually been meeting a couple times, with these people and like, in robot mode. So these people would see me. Like I would see these people in my conscious personality, right? And they would say things and I would take it to suggestions, right? But I had no idea that they were doing what's called accessing me. So essentially is like giving me the activation code, right? A specific one. And I'm not just like listening to them, and it's not a passive activation, because there's passive things where they will, integrate some of these passive activations that basically make sure I listen and takes it to the heart and act on it. But what this was these whole time, some of these people that I was around, multiple of them, not just the intelligence agent, not just the public relations guy and all this, but they were actually accessing me to where I would go in like back to the traumatized state, and I knew what it was. I knew that this was my place. I was part of the cult. I had to obey. If I would be killed if I didn't. Family would be killed. I knew the rules, all this. And there's actually several points where I would be accessed. People that are involved in this are looking at others in the face and acting like everything's okay. But, meanwhile, can actually be beyond stabbing them in the back. The people that do this went through some of this process themselves. If you're active in this and you age into it, everybody goes conscious. And I'm talking about at this point in time, through an activation and then also in certain situations, I already was so experienced that I could phase in and out of different personalities and control it, and then go back to conscious. And I knew the rules. They had showed it, serious business. There's no messing around at all. So you can't overstate it. So the other aspect of this, because this is coming right on, we're moving right through here. So part of this from the very beginning wasn't just developing and making these split personalities and all this. This is entwined with stuff, because all the nasty sex stuff, okay, you have to understand it's desensitizing, okay? Like all the violence, desensitizing, getting used to it, all the little games and everything, getting used to it and practicing real world and dealing with things, and then carrying on and compartmentalizing it. And also certain tactics, layering them into actions in an operational way. Okay. I'm coming up here on 17. I woke up in that car wreck, right? What that was actually my first assignment, okay? And it actually failed. What ended up happening was the wheel came off my car, and I, when I was chasing someone, and I ended up going through a fire hydrant and a light pole and crashing. And I've showed that too. I have the documentation for it.
Right.
So anyways, what's actually happening here is, just think for a second, if someone's going into like deep cover situation, clandestine services, okay, think about it like, how young do you expect someone to be good at doing that? One, the younger they are, the less others would suspect that they're a highly trained agent.
Sure.
The second is that what are you going to do if they have to be ready to kill someone and they've never killed someone before? What are you going to do if they have to act gay and, fuck with some dude in order to get to where they need to go? What are you going to do if they have to fuck with some girl? What are you going to do if they get in any of these situations and they already haven't been through some serious shit? Like, are you going to trust them to be able to do that? Are they seasoned?
Right.
Are they hardened enough? This is very serious business here. So it's not just traumatizing and disassociating and making a compartment for, it's not just a robot at the end of the day. Yes, it's extreme compliance and all that, and that's the base, because the first thing that you get down is a dissociated part that knows the rules, know the penalties if they talk and everything like that. Only then, once that base conditioning, which is like silence, compliance, right, and knowing the repercussions, right? It basically, once that's in, then you can start building on it. It's already built in from the very beginning. Like, hey, if you start remembering this, the way that some of these traumas are done is that if you remember, it will essentially cause flooding of a certain ritual or something that basically is going to make someone want to off themselves or something like that, right? It's called, omega programming, gamma programming. You might remember a ritual that has people dressed up as aliens, and then it'll discredit you. But so this is the primary stuff that the morticians put in me. Like I said, they were dressed up different, all that. I had base conditioning in, and already had all this. Then the rest was training and reinforcing with the same trauma under the training that would be assigned to color, shapes, access codes, and all that. So at this whole time, I had actually been severely desensitized to these aspects, like, where it didn't matter about how gruesome it was, no matter what, right? And even to the extent where some of these activities, there was like a pleasure-pain reversal. It just affected the wiring in the brain to where I was able to operate under stress even better than without stress, right? This is what the whole thing's about. Like, this is all layered. They want to kill 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 birds with one stone. Like, this is, it's as many things as possible, okay? So, anyways, so by now, we'll just call, there's more than this, but let's just call 2 split personalities. Say my split personality is gray, and then the other is day me, So, anyways, at this point, like, my split personality gray had took the first assignment, which was, a high value target. Okay. And, I had to do something. It ended up in me chasing him in a car because I had basically blown my own cover because it was still green as fucking still fucked up. And then it ended up with me chasing him in a car. And then like the car I had, cause I didn't have a license or anything, remember, like I had just obtained a car. So, and then, the front right wheel was fucked up. And then like it ended up literally coming off cause I was like weaving in and out of traffic at like 70, 80 miles an hour. And yeah, I ended up going through a light pole and a fire hydrant, light pole fell on traffic. It was a whole fucking thing. That's where I caught that pistol charge, all sorts of stuff. So anyways, that happens. I go to juvenile, and like I said, DCS state custody, living back with my parents. Eventually, when I age out, I have people ready to come in and fund me to get all these places, right? So at that point, I already know, like, I'm familiar with these groups of intelligence officers by then. I know they are in a group. I know I'm a part of this group. They don't know about the mortician shit or any of the like dark elements, or what do they know? I don't know, but they weren't with that group. Okay. They were more with like a, kind of like a Catholic Jesuit kind of like, not all members, but like under Malta, under Sovereign Military Order of Malta, right? Opus D, Opus Dei, whatever, all that stuff, right? And the more, even more globalists, of course, like so are the Malta and all that. They still though had the underlying access. This is super important because they were the ones that had prepared me, my base programming. The ones that made my base programming had the underlying access, and they didn't hand over those access codes, right? And so the base stuff that brought me back to the early childhood and the real deepest loyalty, right, that I had formed with them over leaving my parents and my grandfather and all that. Yeah, that was still in there locked in. So, by this time I'm 17, they're grooming me. I already know that as soon as I turn 21, I can officially enter this, 21 or 22, but there's possibility to get a waiver and do 21. And like, I already know that like my whole thing is to become, a clandestine agent. And that's what I've been working to do. I am fully aware in that alter persona that this is what I want. These are the rules, and that I'm, a part of these groups, right? So it's very deeply embedded. So I'm fully aware of this, but in my conscious day persona, no clue I have a split personality or anything. It's just completely unknown. And I know that might be hard to understand for people, but it's just the way that it works. If you don't have a split personality, it'd be hard to mention, but like, it's that's all I can say about it, So anyways, again, I had got out and, like I said, there was someone waiting to fund me at this point, the same people I was hooked up with in the streets, right? And again, you get someone to go clandestine, right? How much experience do they have with the drug networks? How much experience do they have with gangs, with cartels? How much experience do they have? It just, that's the sort of thing I had already built up, already like, had the lay of the land, so to speak, and something that like would be almost impossible to do, especially for like someone in any official government capacity. Like it would be very hard for them to develop that network or do anything at that point. Like this is long-term deep cover. I grew up in deep cover before I was officially in these programs, by the good old boy network, some of them motorcycle clubs, that were looking out for me, those people, early on, obviously from the Dragon Societies, right? So anyways, as soon as I'm 19, when I age out of DCS custody again, I had got my license, and like I had said, my guy had put me on, the intelligence agent had put me on the rental list company. So I'm getting these rental lists, okay? And I'm getting all these places. Now, once I had basically demonstrated my ability, I had developed multiple actual deep covers. Like I said, I had like one, like a college kid, right? That dressed like a college kid, talked like a college kid, acted like that, you know. Then I had one where more I deal with like the gangs, the cartels, stuff like that, right? And then just like a few different ones, right? So I had already developed that so much to the extent that I could phase in and out of them like I was an actor in a movie, doing like an actor role. A lot of these actors that are high level have been through Monarch, and it's trained acting, and this is indispensable for espionage. I mean, it's just indispensable. So it was to the point to where we, and I say me and the people that trained me and that were relying on me to do my job, were confident that I could phase into a personality hard enough on command to beat a lie detector test. Okay, because this is one of the things that I was eventually going to be subject to. Okay, so the whole thing is once this gets up. So, anyways, I get these houses, I develop these theme covers. 20 or now, something like that. And what happens is, like I said, I had got in the classified ad. He said, is because that was at the point I didn't see him after that. And the classified ad, he had put me up on that. So what the classified ad was, it had basically the code word in it, and it was a rental property. It wasn't on the rental list. This was just like a loose one in there, right? So I'm like, okay, this is it, And for this thing, my test was, okay, I have to go there. I have to fake having, because I was young and it was more expensive property. And, it was kind of the test was bring my girl, get her like a fake huge ass cubic zirconium ring, act like I'm super rich Franklin guy, pull up like I'm in the middle of the day for my handyman thing and just stop real quick to like check this out. Gotta go, playing the thing, right? So I go to meet this rental property guy and I get there. And, essentially, like I see it and I'm like, oh, well, this isn't quite what the ad I thought was. And I think, oh, maybe I've got the wrong place because maybe I thought this was it and it wasn't. Because like I'm just looking for a code word set up to rent it and like figure I'm going to get instructions or something, right? Because, I'm dealing with the good old boy network and kind of like less and less supervision as I'm getting older, right? Because you got to be self-sufficient and you got to go completely separate. So anyways, I get there, I meet my girlfriend there. I'm pulling up with like the handyman van in my jumpsuit and acting like this. She's got her ring. We're newly engaged, getting the place, But I'm like, oh, this isn't what the advertising said. Like, this isn't a private property. But like, I kind of want somewhere private. I got wolves, this and that. Anyways, he's like, well, you know what? I got the perfect property for you. He's like, I'll tell you what, we'll come here tomorrow. So like, it was kind of like they were pre-screening to make sure I wasn't. So it was the right guy, right? And this was someone in the Carr family, C-A-R-R. And we won't go too much into this, but the Carr family is linked up to like the smiley face killers and some stuff like this. This is the same old network that has been running for a long time. So
TJ,
this
what's the smiley face killers? I asked TJ to look at the smiley face killers.
Yeah, so you'll find some cars, C-A-R-R. A lot of that old stuff. I'm not sure if it's the Manson too. I'm not as familiar with the old history with like all that stuff. I know I've been told about it and all that, but I know the Carr family was involved with that stuff. So anyways, this was the Hunterfield and Ring Farm place, okay? And Hunterfield and Ring Farm, was the place set up Iran-Contra, blah, blah, blah. So that was him, and, he shows me it like the next day or whatever, and I end up getting the spot, okay? And this is it. Like, this was planned, everything like that. I had eventually, like, got like a message of congratulations and stuff like that. They like, pat on the back finally, right? So I'm in here at Hunterfield, about to turn 21, or I turn 21 when I'm there, right? I got my wolves there. I got, there's the ring farm across the street. They're flying in stuff, just different tasks, right? Basically, at this point, I'm maintaining my network, growing the network, all that. And then I am assisting with the wolves and with other, training thing for some of these new recruits, right? Okay. Now, this involves, I'm coming right up on 21 here. This involves, this involves DIA, CIA, all these different groups. So the place that set up this Hunterfield and Ring Farm was Operational Subgroup, okay? It was set up during Task Force 160, which turned into 160th SOAR. But before then, before Task Force 160, before 160th SOAR, like, there was a lot of like, the 160th like had all the like serious stuff that got branched off into other units. So anyways, it was set up by the operational subgroup, and they had operational subgroup 1, 2, and 3. And again, so this was the group that like linked up DIA, CIA, FBI, just all this stuff, and had overlying access. The same people that, were bringing in coke to Mena, Arkansas, they had access to, cut off the radar grid, the satellites and the radars were smuggling in, they had the all encompassing. It was their group, largely ran by Sovereign Military Order of Malta, okay, which Oliver North was one of, and like his predecessors, the people around him, and all this. So, at Ring Farm, at Hunter Field, we got all sorts of people running through there. So you hear about these psionic assets now, okay? And here's the thing about psionic assets, and not just psionic, but really high-profile assets like this, right? High-value assets, okay? This is all ran under the clandestine services, okay? Whether CIA or DIA, HUMINT operations, right? HCS, Human Control Systems, okay? So why do they do this? Because these are high-value, and even if they're not like in a serious operational capacity, they're just safeguarded from other nations, from whatever, just all these things. This is as deep of a cover and as much protected as you can, because not only are they like under that deep cover, but also like there's certain things that monitor them and watch them and also even protect them from outside forces, right? So like that's where a lot of this landed, and they have all sorts of little groups that they're running through here. They'll have the new recruits, and we're seeing how people do to see if we want to try to pull them up into the fold of, the operational subgroup, for example. This, this had no name, but, back then, there was like little things like you had your strategic support branch, right, which was like DIA and CIA and, different names. It's like clandestine service, either way, DIA has Defense Clandestine Service, many names. CIA, right. Directorate of Operations, Clandestine Service, National Clandestine Service, whatever. So it was basically DIA and CIA, those were the two main. Obviously, you're pulling units from all the other branches, but like it's really, we're dealing with people that went through similar conditioning, maybe not extreme, but they had that deep cover programming, okay? So some of these people were just like in the military. A lot of these people were like kind of put in through programs to where they signed on for the military when they were still a minor, and they do like longer contracts and stuff like that, right? A lot of people routed through ROTC, different things like this. But basically, right. Everybody coming through there, through Ring Farm and Hunter Field, had been programmed and were deep cover, not necessarily by the Dragon Society, but involved with these clandestine programs that groom children, because there's different levels of clandestine officers, but like at the top level, everybody. And it's the one, like, for example, what is his name? Andrew Bustamante. Are y'all familiar with that guy?
Yeah.
Okay. He ain't, ask him about it. We'll see what he says. Like, he's referred to, for example, like, oh, he was second, but the first type, like, are a type that he can't even talk about or he'll get locked up. Well, that's this shit, and there's child crimes involved. So I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. But this is the secret of clandestine services, okay? The assets, the top assets, and the real espionage and counter-espionage, the deep-throated fucking backstabbing shit, okay, has to do with these people preparing assets for each other and inserting them into places, then having double agents, right? You double crosses, triple crosses. This is the dirty secret, okay, in the clandestine services and one of the main mechanisms, okay? Now, at the top, it's not just that they're grooming people to go into clandestine services officially, because at this point, this is when on my conscious persona, I was saying, oh, I want to be CIA, and I was hooked up through in my conscious personality. Remember, they routed me and got me a tryout where I just had to meet these people, and, basically, I was like fucking nervous as hell and all this, right? But no, see, even in my subpersonality, I already knew what was going on. But so not everybody end up planning to actually go into clandestine services that went through what I went through. A lot of people, are just a grunt in the military. They might, just work support. They might, just anything. They might be the armorer that sign out stuff or not sign out stuff. Again, they might be a school teacher or something, right? It's anything, but this group was all like military or something involved like that, right? But not everybody, was obviously going into clandestine. But if they don't go into clandestine and say they were just like a ranger and go up the pipeline and eventually, become whatever, some get into Delta, some do just whatever it is, they still have that underlying access. So their whole thing, they might not go conscious, because if you're not in a management position, you're not going conscious. They don't want you aware. So what I'm saying is they have sleeper personalities where globalists have groomed some of these children and insert them in all sorts of different stuff. So like, you'll have like, people in the unit, and guess what?
They're just sleeper cells. They're just sitting there there.
They are a sleeper cell. Okay. And what they'll do is they'll also have the head doctor. They'll also have the white coats. They have the psych doctor, and like, debrief something like this, something like this.
Is there a way to find these people out?
What do you mean?
Like you saying that there are sleeper cells in these units, like they're just sitting there and they haven't been, like, is there a way that you can like figure out who those people are?
Oh, 100%. And it's going to get very, very fucking serious here in a second. But like, and that's what I'm saying. Like, we might go into the third one for this, but no, I'm going to lay out exactly. Yes, there is. And it's a very dangerous situation that has even caused kind of a Mexican standoff in the end of people like cross-activating different assets. It's a fucking mess and terrifying.
Okay.
But yes, so a lot of this is going on, and these head doctors that, like, for example, someone in the unit say they're like, start remembering, or their programming's breaking down, maybe they'll try to put them on some psych. They don't want to say anything already because they'll get pulled from action. You know what I'm saying? Like, you already don't want to say shit. If you're hurt, you're
right. Lose your gun.
Exactly. Yeah. But so what's happening is like, they can get handled. A lot of times they'll have, the white coats. Like, they got to have their handlers, their psych doctors. So a lot of these people are hooked up with the globalist groups, right? But like, so they can just tap and get information, right? Like, basically, use them as a spy. They're unwitting. They're not consciously aware that they have a subsurface personality that was tortured and traumatized so bad that they know they're going to be killed by the globalists if they don't just give the information over. They're not necessarily loyal to the globalists, okay? The only people that are loyal are the people that actually go conscious and step into the fold through horrible acts. Like, you have to make that decision. This is, and we're getting to it where I didn't do that, right?
Okay.
So anyways, this is all happening. They're running people through, for example, like DIA has a lot of assets. They call them, like, they have variations of wolf names, for example, DIA Lobos, okay? And the Lobos crew are kind of like lone wolf assets. Well, some of them were also like in standard military positions and stuff like this, and they'd be strategically placed, but they could get activated for missions. These people, a lot of them had already come from well, all of them come from bad places, but a lot of them, see action or something, or say someone in the unit, right, seeing some serious action. So if they start having flashbacks, like, it ain't no big thing, or they start having weird dreams that might be like some bleeding through of their programming, well, they're just going to think they had horrible dreams because they've already been through a lot of shit, right? So it's just like, it's the perfect thing, and like, they're the perfect people to be a double agent where you can use them domestically, okay? And, during their downtime, they're heavily drinking, they're doing stuff like this, any missing time, easily explained away. It's very hard for these people to come out of this. These people, especially in the military, they're already under SF-312s, right? They're already under NDAs. And then on top of that, like, they're already tied up to contracts, like their whole livelihood is their military, their whole identity is military. And it's just like, if they come out about this, like, or, even try to face it, like, it's the cognitive dissonance is so strong, they only have everything to lose. What will they possibly have to gain? They know it's not going to see the light of day if they're already working in one of these compartmentalized units, or, something where they deal with highly classified stuff, already under NDA, all this. They can't talk about this. You see what I'm saying? So it's really bad spot for them, okay? So anyways, you have, like the DIA Lobos. And the reason I'm saying that is because that unit has already been talked a little bit about publicly. And I'm not here to like recklessly spout off all the locations and all the like unit names and shit like this. Like, that's not what this is about. What this is about is drawing attention to the corrupted areas that are completely compromised and dangerous, you know, like, so, you know, they had these lone wolf assets. Okay. So lone wolf assets leads back to the roots of Nazi werewolf, okay? And these werewolf units, if you look up that, you know, it's hand in hand with what Gladio has come from. This is trained people that are layered off from official activity and plausibly deniable. And they'll stay behind the enemy lines, right? So on that same aspect, just like the werewolf, the Nazi werewolf units, okay, and the whole ideology behind that, they would also do sometimes heinous, serious crimes and make it look like an animal attack or just total psyops, total, you know, sleeper cell. Yeah, and you can look that up. The werewolf roots, you know, comes from that. But then you have Operation Gladio, which is kind of in the same likelihood, but ran by NATO, stay behind forces, sleeper forces, right? And it's that same thing, except for it is domestically. Staying behind enemy lines in America is staying behind, you know, within, you know, the continental U.S. You see what I'm saying? And it's basically their stay-behind units for the globalists. Whether the people are in and out of power or whatever, they have these programmed units, you know, some in Delta, some in Rangers, some in, you know, whatever. It doesn't matter. Absolutely everywhere. You know, a lot of pilots, a lot of medics, you know, stuff like that. People they know that are obviously get pulled into certain areas. They'll put, you know, try to crank more of those units out. You know, how do they do that? Well, they already have all the personality testing and the, you know, the PAS from Gettinger, who is MK Ultra. They have all the tests that they route people through for aptitudes and everything, and they're investing in a certain type, certain bloodline with a genealogy, certain people that they believe they can develop into these units. You know, they don't just like try to program a bunch of people. Like, they're very pointed and have this down to a science. That's what all MK Ultra was. That's what all the threshold testing was back in Nazi Germany. They know the type they're looking for, and they have ways to predict it, and then they start building up. And if they don't accept the base programming early on, you know, that's expendable, and they're not going to try to build that up. Like, the protocol to this is very smart, to where they're not trying to waste a lot of time and resources. And one of the reasons why sometimes they try to hold on to assets a little bit too long, because they have invested so much in them, and they, you know, want to get a return. So anyways, they're running people through this in the ring farm. You know, the cornfields are cut to where like it will be the same as a county, or it will be the same as a state, and this and that. It changes each year. And the thing to do this is like, basically, while these people are activated, right, and going through this training, the terrain gets like mapped in their mind, and there's ways to keep this off book, so it doesn't have to be documented, that you can know, like, you know, what unit they were in, what year, and basically if you have a rough idea of their time frame, if you can kind of figure out some soft activation codes to try to reclaim them, just by going to a map, kind of knowing what certain areas are, and you could like refer to a map, and it's coded with certain activation codes. You see what I'm saying? Like, say you'll have a certain county, and in the middle, the capture the flag would be like at the capital, you know, or it'd be like at a town in that county. Well, that might be to do with their activation code, right? And then there's other stuff to do with where they were born and stuff like this. So basically, like, it's a system that's made up, so like expert handlers and stuff like that, if an asset is identified, they can reclaim them or activate them. Because this is also compartmentalized. Sometimes the oversight passes, and they don't pass off the handling information. Does that make sense? So then you just have a loose asset that's programmed, no one's doing anything. Sometimes they need to be maintained, whether they're a complete sleeper having nothing to do with the military or anything. Like, you know, there's a schedule. They have to be re-traumatized, reactivated every once in a long time to keep those walls up, because the same type of trauma keeps the reinforcement of those dissociative walls. So there has to be occasional, and again, like post-hypnotic suggestion reinforcement.
Like tuning them up, basically.
Exactly. It's what it's called. Yeah, it can be referred to as a tune-up, an updated tune-up. All right. So we got that coming through, and there's tons of people, and you know, everybody that's coming through that field has been through that mind control, and there's, you know, we're testing them. There's certain things taught there. And what's going on there is Rex 84 type drills, okay? This is where it gets really scary. and real fucked up. And we'll touch more on this later, but do you know what Rex 84 is? Rex 84 Bravo?
No.
So the people that set up Ring Farm and Hunter Field were the Iran-Contra smuggling crew from Sovereign Military Order of Malta, Oliver North and them, NSC, who also started FEMA, Federal Emergency Military Action, which was linked up with continuity of government. And there was a scandal when it started because of Oliver North and all that, and they were spending 12 times the amount on covert operations that they were on disaster relief. And it's like, okay, so what's going on with that? Well, what was happening is they were churning out these assets, and all their black budget, smuggling and everything was also, it wasn't just Nicaraguan or, funding that. Like, they were funding, these own operations here, setting up the infrastructure, okay, between Mount Weather and, the other like continuity of government, like Meccas, right, with the deep underground military bases that are set up. And, there's 3 of them. One, I think Mount Cheyenne, is that the one in Colorado?
Cheyenne
Mount Weather.
yeah.
Yeah, Cheyenne, Mount Weather, and then there's another one. I can't remember it off the top of my head right now. But so these bases are continuity of government and linked up with the same group that started this. And what they have is Rex 84B was a drill for detaining American citizens that they have on lists that they deemed a threat. Okay. Keep in mind now, like, who was some of the threats? It was like American citizens that basically don't trust government, and
sure.
You know what it is now. Yeah. So, anyways, literally, these people, like, one of the main things for anybody that's a sleeper asset that's hooked up in this military context, is linked up with New Age Rex 84 type drills, to where we're preparing to, if it comes down to it, run continuity of government drills, which is all the privatized list of people that are globalists involved with this whole network, right? And prepared to do whatever we have to do against citizens or whatever.
Are you saying essentially that in the United States that there are like an army of people, so to speak, that are just waiting to be activated to carry out this order to go after people, like you said, who don't trust the government, want to be left alone, that sort of thing. And it could happen like at the drop of a hat, and then they just execute whatever this mission is. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, in the event, for example, if a major fault line goes, right? If a major fault line goes and already creates some stuff, or in the event of a civil war, right? Or in the event of, already other massive attacks to where it has to operate if, like, a bunch of people that came in from the southern border, start doing terrorist attacks here in a response, they may do something. Yes. So it is not just about rounding up people, but yes, there is a sleeper force set up by the globalists, and it's linked up to what is called the Pentagon's secret army. Okay, now you can pull that up, Pentagon's secret army, and what that is, they euphemistically call it signature reduction, and it mentions that some are civilians, some are within the military, some are stationed abroad, some are stationed.
If you find something, pull it up, like screen share it, TJ. Feel free.
Yeah, they got a Newsweek article from a while ago, but signature reduction. Yeah, but so Pentagon's secret army, and it's it's a huge force. Yeah. So if you want to, so it says some 60,000 people.
Give us a rundown here real fast, TJ.
Little chocolate drills here.
Yeah.
The largest undercover force the world has ever known is one created by the Pentagon over the past decade. Some 60,000 people now belong to this secret army, many working under masked identities and in low profile, all part of a broad program called Signature Reduction. The force, more than 10 times the size of the clandestine elements of the CIA, carries out domestic and foreign assignments both in military uniforms and under civilian cover, in real life and online, sometimes hiding in private businesses and consultancies, some of them household name companies. The unprecedented shift has placed an ever greater number of soldiers, civilians, and contractors working under false identities, partly as natural result in the growth of secret special forces, but also as an international response to the challenges of traveling and operating in an increasingly transparent world.
Dude, send me that URL. This is fucking Newsweek. Is this specifically talking about like cyber warfare in that article, or is that other things?
No, it's talking about everything. Yeah, no, yeah, they have people stationed everywhere. It's talking about everywhere. This is serious.
Send me that link, Tej, when you get the shot, dude. Yeah.
You know,
Go ahead, Greg.
and just to touch here too. Okay, so if you also look up, you know, around the same time, Operation this is skipping forward from the part of my story, but you can also see Operation Flicker, which was when they busted. They had all the people for the kiddie porn that were at DARPA. NRO, National Reconnaissance Office, which a lot of this is hooked up with NRO. This is weaved into everywhere, but you know, an NRO has its own Delta Force, by the way. I'm not sure if y'all are aware of that. Now, this is all linked up, you know, and all linked up again. It's clandestine service. These are people that have been programmed since birth to varying levels. Not everybody was able to get trained to a certain thing. Not everybody has different things, but these are people that have, on a deep level, they have been convinced that their globalist masters are all powerful and it's in their best interest. Now, if they flip a switch to like activate people, it has to have a conducive external environment, because if the external environment isn't conducive and it doesn't match their programming, they might become disillusioned and you know, not want to follow through. But like, say if it's in the middle of an earthquake, or if it's in the middle of like, you know, some serious terrorist attacks from the southern border or something, like, it might make sense for them to do that, especially if they think they're going to be killed or more people will be killed otherwise, right? So it gets pretty deep. But yeah, so there's huge clandestine, you know, sleeper force. And it's sprinkled everywhere. Again, it's not just in clandestine services, and it's not just in military. There is tons of people in all walks of life, you know, most of them on reserve or sleeper status, right? And just waiting to be tapped if the situation is conducive. You know, they might be tapped for other things as well if they get in a useful spot, right? This is... I'll go back here in a second, but like, we get it, right? So this is the people that we're training, and we're doing these drills because it's very coordinated, okay? I was in FEMA Region 4. FEMA's split up into different regions, right? FEMA split up into 10 regions. So we're dealing with Region 4, and, you know, this is linked up directly with National Guard, obviously, right, with continuity of government. So it's basically like, you know, there's gonna be different people for different things, and, you know, just there's a way about it. Like, you know, obviously, like, there's designated holding areas and stuff like that, and some people are the people that are going to you know, run the facility. Some of the people are there basically would be like hunter seekers to go out and get strays. There is like a whole, you know, continuity of government and like emergency disaster scenario situation set up, which obviously that's already, I mean, we know that sort of thing is set up. I mean, now, might not know that it's nefarious and that they have sleeper cells everywhere, but that's the reality of this. The people that are doing this have been doing this sort of activity for long back, you know, and you have, you know, it's a lot of this is from Jesuits, and then crossover with some of this Dragon Society and these different things, but especially in United States, you know, one of the powerful forces was under Malta. And you'll see like these people that were Malta, you know, all these Bush people, right? You know, Cheney, Malta, Opus Dei, all this, like, so it's a huge thing. It's a globalist ties, and you know, they even have these people. There's another thing is people that are hooked up with this. They have now like undetectable implants, right? But basically, you know, they used to be detectable back in the day, but now there's like implant mechanisms, and now it's like nanotechnology and stuff like that. But there's a variety, especially people that have older implants, and it's the sort of thing to where they would have to go in a Faraday cage or an anechoic chamber. And, you know, you have a spectrum analyzer to measure the bands. And, you know, most of them now have to be activated with certain frequency bursts to wake them up, right? But, you know, they can go every once in a while, they'll go on, transmit, like, you know, not a Morse code, but like an encrypted, you know, transmission. It's very low energy, very this, you know. Some of these people that are higher priority that are on these assets, they're augmented, and they like will have a certain like isotope they've been like tainted with that's more detectable by satellite. You know, this is all hooked up with like Talent Keyhole, and the Talent Keyhole is crossed over to Project Talent. And we'll get more into this because I'm going all over the place. But so anyways, you know, I am completely witting on this, and I'm kind of like the little protege apprentice of one of the head programmers and handlers for FEMA Region 4 that's assigned to it. And, you know, I'm there at Hunterfield Ring Farm, and we're running everybody through, and I'm learning basically how the activation codes work, how they are set up, how they're embedded, and how they are linked, and how they are linked up to like maps or other things you can refer to so you can obtain them without documentation, how it interfaces faces with people going by like their date of birth and the place that they're from. It's basically like, it's the same thing like name, rank, serial number, but there's specific coding for these globalist assets. They're also hooked up with NATO, and these implants are spitting out NATO frequencies, by the way, NATO registered to NATO. We'll get to this. So by now I'm 21, okay? And I'm at Hunterfield Ring Farm. This is when I told y'all I'm consciously, had talked to someone, and I'm trying to get to be in the CIA. And then we had friends of the family, and I talked to them, and they're like, yeah, we know you're good for it. And basically, like in my conscious personality, I think I'm just going to try out for the CIA, right? Okay. And I told y'all, like, one of the people I have a grow house with, he was like, oh, his people showed Assad the grow house, who was, as far as I knew then, was a CIA guy too, which I'm trying out for, and basically he knew about the grow, and I'm like, oh fuck, I'm fucked. Like, that's when it all started hitting the fan. Okay. But so the thing is that, still I hadn't merged those yet though. So the thing is that by then, one, I had already kind of become disillusioned, and there was several reasons for this. Some of it was that it was compartmentalized so much, and like, I was working with a bunch of guys that weren't serious to me. Like, as fucked up as it was, like when I was, murder at that point, murder was nothing to me, just to be honest. Like, these things had already happened. I had seen it. I'm not stressing it. Like I'm in deep on every angle. I'm very weathered and seasoned by now. Even though I'm only 21, I'm very weathered and seasoned. I'm also self-motivated, and like, I'm out there getting it. Like, these people are stupid as fuck to me, and they're weak, just to be honest. That's how I felt about it. A lot of this changes here, and I'll explain it, because once I, faced my childhood and everything, the malice left, right? And I wasn't angry and didn't want to do harm anymore to perpetuate that cycle. But so, right as I turned 21, this was the thing where I went through the paces, and there was an element to where I went in with a very small, limited body, that we signed paperwork from, and I became officially inducted. And I was, and then through that, I was compulsory inducted into an acting position there as operations manager at Hunterfield and Ring Farm for this forward operating location, right next to the Campbell satellite, which was at this, which was at the experimental farm link, which was just at this like University of Tennessee campus site. It was a satellite Campbell, like Fort Campbell site, right? So that was right through the woods from where I was at Hunterfield and Ring Farm. So Hunterfield and Ring Farm was like a forward operating location, whatever you want to call it. So anyways, right then I finally, had actually got put on paperwork, and I already, was very disillusioned and not happy. And there was a few other things going on. Right as it was coming to, again, I had been going to the strip club to build that up, because in my conscious persona, that was my assignment, right? To go to the strip club, all this, okay? Now, what I was doing was pulling girls, getting people, procuring girls for, like, for example, the Royal Order of Jesters and the Knights of Columbus parties, because Douglas Henry was a Knight of Columbus, the senator whose family I knew, and, was involved with, right, that I ended up getting busted in his daughter's car. And then the Royal Order of Jester, his son was my charge partner. He was the city council, the law professor, all this, the Royal Order of Jesters had that human trafficking case going on. But so, like, we would get girls for them. They were all a bunch of old guys. We would get the girls, like, invite them to these parties, kind of get them to know, liaison and this and that, right? There was someone else. So with these strip clubs, what they were being ran by, not all of them, but like one of the main guys in this was someone named Mike Ocello, and he ran what's called the Association of Club Executives, ACE. Okay. And he went on to work with Homeland Security Investigations, which it was my understanding that Saad Rahi was his contact there too, but anyways, so what had happened with that was Mike Ocello was like, one, he got to own all these strip clubs and stuff. Okay. And he was also like a part-time police officer in, like, the worst neighborhood in, like, Illinois somewhere and stuff like this. But, like, so he could facilitate trafficking at night and stuff like that. Right. Like, he's like a millionaire. Why is he working, as a cop and stuff like that? He was all these positions, school board, right. All this stuff. So he was plugged in, he had went through whatever West Point, I guess something like that. Like he already went through military intelligence, all that. So he was an intel asset, right? And what his guy was, he got the deal. It was Operation Blue Shield or Operation Blue something with Homeland Security. It's called Coast, okay? So Coast and Ace National still runs to this day. Or I think it still runs to this day. He's now with Rick Holdings, which like does all these entertainment and nightclubs. But so anyways, you know, they go around, they educate about trafficking, right? This and that, kind of like safeguard the clubs. They liaison with law enforcement and give them new training and updates. They're basically like club executives that run strip clubs that are linked up with Homeland Security to watch for trafficking. In reality, they're whitewashing it, serving up any like random, any random competition that they can absorb, serving it up for public relations, and then running the business like a mafia, clean and, business in the back, right? And just keeping it clean in the front, right? Mafia style. These people aren't about doing more damage and making it more sloppy. They're about using assets and, doing this clean. More money, less violence. That's everybody wins, right? So anyways, Mike Ocello was in a bunch of scandals, like Teamsters scandal. Like he was known for basically blackmailing politicians, and like some of this hit the news. And he had a fixer that we knew in the network of people like me that was being groomed for this, named Skip. I think Skip Milton or something. I'm not sure. But anyways, the thing was Skip had got arrested once. He had bragged about having blackmailing politicians and basically being a fixer, right, and all that. He was hooked up with the MMA scene and all that too. There was some plans to fuck him off, which did end up happening, by the way. But like, so it was him and some other people, but me and the other guys had seen basically the writing on the wall. Say, oh, fuck. One, I'm realizing like, okay, they're pulling me into this, but I have all these grow houses. They're asking for personal favors. This is getting worse. And these guys are fucking scumbags. I was a scumbag myself, but the thing is, coming where I come from, where, my mom was an escort. I grew up around abused family, had sisters, stuff like this. I was not down with this. They have people to laugh at crackheads, keep people hooked, stuff like that. I took that personally, like my family was affected by that. So I already was disillusioned with this and was like waiting for a chance to like fucking do something. I was not happy. I was in a bad spot because I was already deep, but I saw that like these guys were weak. They were cowards. They preyed on the weak. They just were, I did not like them regardless of how bad of a person I was, right? So it gets to the point where, we're procuring these assets. I'm doing this, I'm building up. And like I said, two things happened right around this time. As soon as I got on paperwork, the first test in my conscious personality, which I didn't remember, in my conscious personality, the first test was to basically bring this stripper home to my house at Ring Farm Hunter Field. And like I said, they had named it. And from what I knew, the CIA like somehow didn't know, since my guy had vouched for me, the long-term family friend intelligence agent had hooked me up with the interview. I didn't like, I just was under pressure, like he was going to get me in. There was going to be minimal questions asked, right? And I didn't like go and say like, yes, I have grow houses and like this is how I plan to be an asset, right? Like that wasn't it yet. Like that never came into play. I was laying very low and super stressed, right? So, anyways, they got me to pick up that girl. And, I didn't know what it was. Like I said, I didn't know what the assignment was. But then she starts crying and explains the whole genital warts from HPV thing, right? So, my play was, okay, I'd set her up like we had talked about it. I believed that she wasn't like testing me and gonna snitch because she was like crying her eyes out, like, it was serious. So what it was like, okay, you're gonna go up to Kentucky with your brothers, lay low. And my thing was that, I was gonna go there and feel them out. I still wasn't sure if it was a test to see if I wouldn't do it or if they wanted me to do it. I really didn't know. So really what I was gonna do was, if they did want me to do it, like I was gonna go there and I was planning basically to basically fuck them up and act like it was an op gone bad and that they tried to get me, right? Or I was hoping that they were like, it was going to be like, you passed the test, you weren't supposed to do that, right? Like, but it's like, it didn't make sense. I just like really didn't know what the fuck was going on. I was like, I can't believe that, like, this would be the first thing, Yeah. The other part was, though, in my subsurface personality, okay, because this was before my conscious personality. That was the test. And the subsurface personality was the Sheriff Headley, his deputy son, had raped my girlfriend's best friend, okay? And my girlfriend's best friend was from a high-profile family and that her dad was a doctor that was involved with this network in a major way. Okay. And he wanted revenge. He wanted retribution, right? He wanted blood, and that's what had to happen. So, so still I was in deep and, was like, y'all are setting me up like, and I had seen what was happening with everybody else. So I was like, oh, fuck. So like, that had happened right before this other part. So I was already waiting for like, to get out of this for retribution and all this. And then as soon as I got on the paper and they tried to get that stripper situation to happen, I was like, okay, this is kind of my chance. And that was, like I said, I'd introduced myself as Gray and stuff. That's when my two personalities really started merging. I had finally got on paperwork that inside of myself that was scared of the threats, that knew these people were all powerful and stuff. Since I was on paper, I knew this is my one chance. If I'm going to do something like and have a chance of like getting some sort of protection or something, like I'm going to make my move now, right? And that's why, like, basically that's what it took was, the horrible stuff that like tied with my family and all this to like come together all at once and like, that was fucking it. So, so that's what happened. When I went there to report, like I had mentioned, when I went there to report to these people and act like whatever happened, that's when the guy there that was like the manager happened to be the Marine that I had known. And, I had previously told you I blacked out, woke up in the hospital. What had happened was he had took me down there and they were waiting, knew what happened, and they had a portable apparatus, which is essentially like the helmet that goes on that's like electromagnetics, called the helmet. Like it's like basically scrambles your fucking brain, electronic dissolution of memory, basically zaps your brain into a vegetable and you forget fucking what happened and you turn into like like it really mentally regresses you real bad. Like they wanted to debrief me, which was going in this. I was familiar with these techniques because, I was, obviously fucking knew about this, and like that was the thing to where I ended up getting into it with them over that. At the same time, what was going on down there was one of these laptops, again, that had access codes for assets. And like a lot of this was traded. Like assets are sold for very high prices or like kind of bartered with for powerful positions because it's much more than about money. But also sometimes they'll sell an asset for money when it's not about money because they still have underlying control to their asset and they'll be using them, backdooring them for the blackmail. Okay. So a lot of these sex slaves and, a lot of these honeypots, they're actually using for sleeper assets for espionage, and even though they're selling them as a sex slave, the people who help generate them with this state-of-the-art, protocol to build these sex slaves, right? They're actually mind controlled, and the people they sell them to don't understand the extent of this or the underlying access, don't really understand orchestrating, controlling, and manipulating. Okay, it's a science. Now, again, to build up to this point, because I mentioned the Knights of Columbus, I mentioned Royal Order of Jesters. We're talking about like Royal Order of Jesters and like a lot of these other like Order of Quetzalcoatl, all this stuff. This is a Masonic thing. So these are like 32nd and higher invite groups only, right? Okay, so well, these people path work through all that to get it to 32nd. One, like you already have to have like money and like a network and like have done things, right? But also you have stair-stepped up through all the theatrical rituals and are understand to the point to where you, even if you don't understand exactly what they're doing with it, you are prepared before you get pulled into the descent. You were prepared and could like essentially participate in these rituals and then ready for the new layer to see how they involve them in people and traumatize them. And you already have like the mechanical understanding of how to put on these rituals and how to handle and access. Even though you haven't learned that level of the knowledge yet, that's one of the parts that's kept, right? Their understanding and that they are committed enough, they can go through these rituals, they can get pulled into it, they've been vetted in certain ways and built up with this knowledge, so they're capable of doing it. Have they crossed the threshold into doing something horrible yet or not? That's another thing. But part of these rites and rituals, as they climb this, and some stuff, there'll be things like, I don't know if y'all have heard this, but like high Rosicrucians, like, they have to like fuck a dead body and shit. Have y'all heard about this?
I've heard of Rosicrucians, but I've never heard this aspect.
Oh yeah, it's fucked up. But like, I mean, this is it. Like, they're doing stuff to desensitize themselves to like do this, and like over time, it's just more and more and more. It's less, it's like like if you're a kid and steal, your heart might be beating. The second time, maybe it won't. This and that. this happens with everything over time. As you build up in business, you'll eventually, it's hard not to look at employees more like data points, like numbers, and kind of make little adjustments to adjust them. If you're in a political position, or if you're, Department of Agriculture, Health and Human Service, something like that, you see people's numbers, you see how many people die each day, and like how little adjustments can make, and like, it's just logical, right? So it's just like really desensitizing people in every way, shape, and form, ideologically, and also just like through the heinous acts themselves, right? So that's what's happening, and that's why a lot of these people that are high up on this, again, Royal Order Jesters, the people high up in Knights of Columbus, which are Rosicrucians, and things like this, like they've went through this path working, understand the rituals and all that, and like are good, know those protocols, and can enact them competently, and have been desensitized to a certain point, right? Then comes the part where it's a test, right? Because okay, are you really willing to go there? And part of this too is, keep in mind, the Shriners, they're dealing with sick kids, right? And stuff like this, a lot of the kids here, they're already coming from abused homes, right? Even if that's enabled, right? But so they're saying okay, well, this kid would end up a junkie and dead anyways. Yeah, we're putting him through this trauma and this training, and we use him and abuse him, but at the same time, we're also giving them a shot at life and to become something they would never become anyways, and we're giving them a chance. It's a very jaded mentality. So and it doesn't, they don't have to they're not doing it because of that, but anything that can justify it or make it make sense in their mind is easier. And when you're getting paid, just to be clear at this point, okay, when I'm 21 pulled into this on paper, bucket, over this situation at the strip club, I was polling every single day. I was putting $1,000 in my pocket just to spend for the day. That's $365,000 a year. I had 10 houses. 5 of them were mine. The other 5 renting, right? Some renting to own, stuff like this. I didn't outright purchase anything. I wasn't washing money to that point or anything like that. But so, I had rent for 5 houses, then a half or a third of rent for another 5, and high utility bills because we were growing, right? And I had the cover business. So you have to understand, I was easily pulling in a couple million total a year, right? $1,000 cash just to spend and give away each day, and really up there. I had outlines. I wasn't able to save a certain amount. I had to spend it. I had to commit a certain bit to this. I had rules that had to be abided by, right? But I was living well and had everything to gain and everything to lose, right? So it's before anybody's in there, again, whether they were in my position, which is a little bit unique and kind of on the deep end, or whether they just had normal businesses built up. Still, there's fail safes. These people, once they get to this point, they've been through parties and stuff. They won't get invited into this or even have the chance to come into the fold unless they've already got them on blackmail. It won't happen. There's a sterile protocol. That means it will not happen, no exceptions, unless if these things are in place. If they haven't caught them at a party, whether it's something willingly or whether they drugged him with scopolamine and then got him to do something, or concocted a scenario, there is going to be something. They simply will not bring someone into the fold or attempt to, unless if there is a contingency plan in place and they can pull out the rug from underneath. This will not happen. This is an intelligent design by consummate professionals that do this for a living, okay? And we're talking about the people that are at the top of their trade craft, and we're talking about, you understand, we're talking about all these people are clandestine, absolute OGs, okay? This is no joke. These people have went through this. They've desensitized themselves over time. Most of them went through it as a child. Even if they don't remember it, it's affected the mentality. And then once you bring them the opportunity to come into the fold, that is what we call going conscious, to where that childhood compartment trauma that's linked up to these heinous acts and all that, right? They build up whatever they can to make you do this, and then if you do a horrible act like murder, it will kind of open up that pathway, right? And this is occult path working. It opens up that pathway right through that will bridge actual neuron pathways in your brain and connect the compartments, and you will regain access to those memories. Okay, like this is how it works. This is a age-old design, and this has to go back again with the original demonology and the seals and the compartments and all this. But also, like, this act, it's not just they want you to shoot someone, like, like you're, shoot a random person from a drive-by in the car. No, this is done in a ritual context, again, with a certain stimuli that links back to that assists in opening those compartments, right? So this is what it is going conscious. Like, these people go for that. What did they want me to do? They wanted me to do this, with this lady, and, to go conscious and to do this, right? To bridge it together. And what was happening, they weren't threatening me in this way. They suggested, remember, that I bring her to the house that was growing marijuana. So, like, they lightly told me that they knew I had these houses that were growing marijuana, and this was my test to come in here. So, like, it's like, oh shit, they've got this. Like, if I don't do this, like, I'm fucked, right? Like, so, like, the way they set it up was not only that they had blackmailed me, not only that they had plausible deniability, not only that 3 people knew that I was, clandestine service, like, officially, like, but, like, they were ready to pull the rug out from under me so fucking hard, that, like, there was every reason to do it, and the only reason not to was because I'm not a fucking piece of shit, morally bankrupt motherfucker, no matter what happened to me as a kid. You know what I'm saying? And it was so compartmentalized that I doubt they knew all the aspects of my family and how much this had, like, triggered the fuck out of me and bothered me. And whatever happened, my psyche fucking broke. I wasn't going, and I bucked on them, right? So, that happened. I got the laptop. I went, I'm going, I'm on the way. I had called my girl, it cut off, they fucking took control of the motherfucking car's gas and shit. And fucking, I ended up getting in that wreck immediately, right?
Boston Bruce.
Yeah. So what had happened too is, there was other people around because I was already being monitored, and there was already cars. I'm not sure if y'all had seen the stuff I posted, but when I got in that wreck, the trunk was jammed. They kept evidence for safekeeping, and then luckily there were some people there, and all that ended up happening.
Yeah,
so,
I saw some of that on an X.
Yeah. So anyways, that's what happened about that situation. Obviously by then I got out. I thought I just had amnesia from the wreck. I didn't understand in my conscious personality, right? All that, it was all confusing. I ended up getting locked up. They burned me with all that, changed the record, went through all that, while I was locked up in prison, went through these stuff. They put me next to people in cells that told me stories about similar things, with the life lesson being that if I keep going against the grain, I'm going to be serving life in prison. You know what I'm saying? And all this. There were supposed to be internal resolutions too, because the group, the men that had basically, like, got me into the clandestine services that weren't with the not the people with the dragon societies, but the people more with Malta and stuff like this, that were like family friends that always kept kind of clean and all that claimed not to know about the other stuff. They basically were like, hey, we're taking care of this internally, like, blah, blah, blah. You got caught up in the middle of this. These are bad people. We're working against them. You know what I'm saying? Basically gave me the whole, they're the white hats scenario, right? And all this shit. And then basically we're just like, look, we're going to seal this. Just shut the fuck up and sit. You know what I'm saying? You're going to get through this. When you get out, we'll take it from there eventually. Eventually I got released. By then it was like 2013 when I finally got released. And while this had all been happening, I had been in solitary a lot and all this. And like I said, kind of like, had deprogrammed, face it all, and then those two personalities had merged. So so it all came together while I was in there locked up, and they had sent me messages. There was people that they even had in the prison that were linked up through the network. A lot of these people high up in the gangs knew about this sort of, MK Ultra Manchurian candidate monarch, and all this. So at that point, that's when it all came together, and then I'm free, and it's time to whistleblow. So. Yep. So, do you want me to go here and wrap up to the part, I guess, where we're get up to organized safety into where we're launching it? There's a tiny bit left, less than a half hour, I'd say, till we get to the point where organized safety and all that, and it'll wrap it up for the next one that is that's just going all to the contemporary stuff.
Mm-hmm. No, I think we're only at hour 2, right? I mean, I'm good for if you're good to keep going. I would like to keep here. Yeah. To organize safety and everything that you're doing there.
Do you have any questions about this so far?
Dude, honestly, at this point, like this story, I mean, I've had questions throughout the whole thing, like a few of them, and I didn't want to interrupt your train of thought and like everything you're going through, because it feels like it's really hard for you to kind of piece this all together, because it probably is, maybe still a little bit scrambled in your own mind, about, and so I don't want to throw your train of thought off too much. Really, a lot of the questions I had were related to some of these like secret societies and where they came from, and like where they started, some of these people that like you're talking about in passing, like who they are, stuff like that, which is okay. These are things that like would bunny trail down really, really far and probably throw us off pace. But, no, like this makes sense at this point. You've done a really good job, like recapping what it is that you were talking about, and then including a lot more detail, quite frankly, which was really good detail. And then getting into now like where you're at, ready to whistleblow and organize safety. I think I don't know, TJ, what do you think?
Anything you want to fly with, brother? I'm rocking and rolling, man. I dropped you probably about 120 links.
No, I can't. Yeah, I can't go through all the things you sent. Like I see some of them, but
come on, man.
Yeah. I'm gonna read and listen at the same time, bro. I'm not that skilled. No, just
that's what I'm doing.
Oh yeah, are you? Sure you are, dickhead. But no, I want to give you the space to essentially tell this story, and if I have like really pressing questions, like I'll ask. But honestly, I'm just ready to keep listening to you.
For sure, brother.
All right, then. All right, so I'm back free. Now, where we had left off with the last one, where now my personalities had merged. I had remembered both personalities, everything I was doing, and obviously I was plugged in with this covert network on a very deep level. Understood some people's access codes, understood how this was happening, and remembered lots of people. So what did I do? I started contacting people, got in touch specifically with 160th Pilot, so on and so forth, and, got with them. At that point, a lot of them hadn't known much about the background or understood and had no fucking clue about, the dragon societies or these, subgroups, and basically like what the fuck was going on really, right? There was like a very small, like kind of like on the books for the clandestine stuff, that they were involved with, in like a pilot, like, well, no shit, he's a pilot. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, so anyways, basically, I get together with them, by that time too. Also, the family friends who had kind of, the intelligence agent who had kind of got me the original tryout and kind of routed me in here, had also like shown me the 1995 ACHRE that they were talking about, where the child mind control stuff was brought up, and Bill Clinton eventually apologized for that whole scene, and all this. So, we're realizing that it's a network. We get dissociative trauma therapists, and we're getting information from that. I start whistleblowing. At the same time, there is a child scandal at Covenant School, because that they just whistle-blew on the pedophilia that was being covered up and tied to the VIPs. Austin Davis was whistleblowing on that. And to be clear, I have no relation to Austin Davis, but just, but that's what was happening. While I was whistleblowing on Nashville Christian Early Childhood Development Center, to where, there was things going on with the children there, some of those preconditioning steps. And that's where the senator's daughter was working, that I had been arrested in her car and all that. And, I had remembered about all these.
Yeah.
So
when you say you started whistleblowing, is this the beginning of your other channel where you are masked and putting out info?
No.
Okay.
So that wasn't until 2022, because
okay.
Well, yeah. So what happens is I'm starting to whistleblow as publicly. I am talking about the programming out of the gate right, out of the gate sub-projects, because it's not just the psionic testing and all that. What they're doing is actually, they're generating the sleeper assets that eventually were fed into Pentagon Secret Army and other things. It's not just the Pentagon Secret Army. That's the only element of this that has really hit the public, right? But essentially people are getting routed through gate, through Project Talent, which is, selecting people and monitoring them throughout life. And then there's, just talent and it's talent sub-projects. And that was basically like, selection, for this. And then they're routed to the gate and the gate sub-projects. And what I start whistleblowing on is that they are programming children. So they're programming children as sleepers. So that's where I start whistleblowing on publicly, that they're programming children as sleepers. And on the back end, through some of the official channels and the people that I was hooked up with, we are whistleblowing because we had a database already of some of these assets that were on the laptop and some of these that were supposed to be sold that had got intercepted. And, we have lists of some of these assets, right? So we have lists of assets, we have locations, we have a bunch of information tied to this. Rich, remember, I had tried to call the FBI, and that was how I ended up, getting falsely arrested and clerical error and all this. So what had happened was I was whistleblowing on children being programmed into sleepers, and and all that activity at the same time.
The Nashville Christian School, that's the one that we were talking about before with the school shooter. Is that correct?
So Covenant is. Someone else was whistleblowing on Covenant at the same time for a pedophilia scandal. It didn't come out that one was also involved, but Covenant was plugged in with programming these children. So was the Early Childhood Development Center. There's multiple locations in Nashville, yes.
Do you think a lot of these school shooters are kids who were sleeper cells, basically?
No. I don't think I know 100% fact. And you can even trace back through their connections and you will see that they were, at these pull-out vocational classes, right? That they're at certain special needs classes. You can link up, there'll be overlap with certain personnel. And yes. And I'm sure there's an exception, but it's...
Yeah, for sure. Is there one of these school shooters that you can think of off the top of your head, like name-wise, that is an example of this?
So I'll be honest with you. It's so upsetting to me that I have tried to ignore some of this, but virtually, I want to say not virtually, everyone that I've ever looked at was like very obviously involved. But like if we pull one up and can start pulling in, you'll see it's either GATE, AP, or STEM, right? They're in some of these, or they're in some sort of pull-out vocational thing, or they're in some sort of like disciplinary correctional program, which also are called behavior.
TJ, the trans shooter or whatever at the elementary school.
Audrey Hale. Yeah.
Audrey Hale, yeah. Like we were talking about before, just kind of curious because she had a very anti-Christian sentiment too to what she was doing.
For sure, yeah. And, I'm not saying that she was programmed to shoot the school, but it's likely a direct result of what happened with that. And, that is essentially turning over. Whatever she went through had, obviously affected her to the point where that's what she decided to do. Given what we know about Covenant and these programs and the history, I'm very confident saying that, yes, this person was involved with that. There's some more aspects of that, but I'm not ready to go in, and I definitely wouldn't want to misquote or mischaracterize an aspect of it. Yeah. But yeah, this is what happens is there is a quite sizable program of this going on that, that is doing this sort of thing to children. And, sometimes it goes bad. I'm of the mind that it seems some of these school shootings were actually instigated deliberately, but some of them seem to be a byproduct of a disgruntled asset that decides to kind of go back where some of the stuff was, and then in a twisted, version does something horrible, and it, doesn't have to make sense.
Got you. No, I'm just trying to, for anybody listening, to point at something that's they can run down and look into themselves, and give them a waypoint to start from to look into these things. But you can continue, brother. Yeah.
So whistleblowing about, this program, and I'm laying out, some of this gate information that's just coming out now, was laying all that out. But 2014, laying all that out. I hooked up with some other people that were, clandestine agents, so on and so forth, hooked up with this whole sleeper asset. There is already a group that was disgruntled about this, that had been going. It's too much to explain exactly how, but some of that group had a hand in me coming out of this and surviving, right? There's definitely multiple people that were disillusioned with what was actually going on and had been exposed to elements of the program, even though they were compartmentalized, people know and people see things. So there's always been some people behind the scenes that are kind of trying to fight this, but not exactly sure what it is or how to fight it, and don't see the whole picture, right, of how this piece programs from early on, how these people do that, blah, blah, blah. So anyways, I hook up with some of my people. We're trying to get it shut down. There's internal talks on the back end. They're obviously blocking it from investigations, all this. We're trying to get emails of, we have a list of these schools and other places and assets, and we're getting lists of emails for parents and emailing them as anonymous other parents at the school saying that they notice behavioral changes in their kids, and that they're troubled. Just doing everything we can. Okay.
I do have a quick clip I was going to throw up just in the midst of this for some relevance here about the Audrey Hale situation, where it was basically saying that she was receiving special counsel, private counseling sessions with the school's head pastor, whose daughter was among some of the people who were killed in that shooting. And there's just a quick video clip here that'll kind of bring a little bit of relation to that. You'll also see the shooter come through here. You can actually see her on camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if people start digging into these kids that do the school shooting, there definitely is several very notable, very hard connections to quite obvious behavioral modification programs. The reason that I'm not so familiar to rattle them off, and I could provide a few samples when we talk about contemporary stuff next time, but the reason I don't get so close to it is, one, because it's so upsetting, and I already know the score and the big picture. These are saturated with people, and it just, doesn't make sense to me personally to apply my energy there when we're more worried about, networking with these survivors of these programs and working on building that up.
Right.
So at this point, I'm out whistleblowing on this, and I have again set up multiple grow houses, okay? And this is what I'm doing to fund operations because, we are trying to stop this by any means necessary, and there's a network of other people as well, okay?
Okay. So
at this point, I have 4 houses here in a place called Sullivan Hollow that are in a circle. This is down 0.7 miles of 1-lane driveway across 2 narrow bridges, right? The houses aren't even numbered back here, and it's all split off from a power pole with A, B. You can't even tell the addresses back there, And essentially, we are taking action against certain parts of the covert network, right? Direct action. And, things get pretty serious. I am linked up there with a former president of the Moose Lodge. A lot of these places like Moose Lodge, Elk Lodge, so on and so forth are also plugged in with this and are a mechanism for some covert funding as well. We'll funnel off from them. People will be within these organizations for connections, and then they'll also simultaneously use the organization for cover. And it's a mechanism used like that, and this lady was also, this Helen Rose, she's passed now. This lady was the former president of Moose Lodge. She was a member of the Eastern Star.
What's Moose Lodge?
So Moose Lodge is just it's like a philanthropist organization, loosely tied up with Masons. It's, kind of like you got the Rotary clubs, you got Moose Lodge, you got Elk Lodge. It's just, it's just community lodges, again, similar to the Masonic structure, but mostly less ritualistic with that stuff and more just philanthropy. People go there and meet in a community, and it's generally philanthropy, to be clear. But they are used, and if you look into them, they're historically been used and involved with funding special operations, and there's been a lot of overlap there. So
weird.
this lady is there. I get hooked up from a friend to rent, from, again, the same group that I worked with that was like, the good guys, right? That kind of like helps me through this, right? And, they get me hooked up there and I start renting from her. And when I'm renting from her, at first I have one house and she's telling me about, I'm coming over there because her basically roommate and best friend dies and I'm a pallbearer at her wedding. Okay. And while I'm a pallbearer at her wedding, I meet my next door neighbor there who is Special Forces pilot, of course, and president of the Tennessee chapter of a motorcycle club. Okay. Mm. So I'm like, oh, this is a coincidence. Like, okay, they got their guys here, right? I'm not paying attention to them. They're not paying attention to me. The lady starts asking my help for stuff around the house. Again, I do handyman stuff, and that's how I'd introduced myself to her, right? She didn't know I was growing pot in her houses, right? So anyways, she eventually I get to know her and she's like, likes the companionship clearly. And she starts talking about her family that was in the CIA. And she talks about her uncle that came home one day and essentially was traumatized and ended up spending the rest of his life in a mental asylum. And I'm like, oh, fuck. I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, these people got me coming out here. She's telling me that the doctor, because this 0.7 mile driveway, all on one side, it's her land and her houses. And on the other side, there's a doctor out there, right? And she starts talking about how she fucking hates the doctor, how he's evil, and how the CIA is evil. And I'm like, oh, what the fuck? So I can't help but to like, slowly start like, throwing in like paperclip stuff in there and then MK Ultra and then even include like, the ritual abuse statutes, and, all this. And she doesn't come out right and say it, but like it's clear, right? So it's clear that she's clear that she knows more than she's willing to talk about. And she's quite senior. So anyways, she tells me that the doctor has pulled some dirty tricks and is trying to get her land. And she doesn't want him to, but she needs enough to survive and this and that. So, we had grown in a relationship and we've talked about all this out there stuff. And by then I'm kind of figuring like, oh man, they got her in this program. Like, what's her deal? But I don't want to push too hard and she's old and, stuff like this. But she ends up telling me she wants me to get her land. So we work out a deal to where I am renting to own basically the one house highest on the hill and then 3 little trailers that are in a circle right there. And then the only other part that she has is the house that she lives in and then the Special Forces pilot. Okay. Now, basically I start renting all that and I'm renting to own. She has enough money to live on. Everybody's happy, right? So we're taking direct action, whistleblowing, publicly about this, living in a valley, growing weed, funding operations, doing what I can to get this word out. At the same time, start to launch organized safety, but it hadn't been formed yet. At this point, really all I'm doing is networking with therapists, the trauma therapists, just like the ACHRE, the 1995 ACHRE, where they had talked about this. That. Yeah. So what we're doing with that is, we know that all these people from this program, a lot of survivors end up going to dissociative trauma therapists. So we start emailing all the dissociative trauma therapists on Psychology Today, on this, on that, from the International Study in Science of Trauma and Dissociation, just everybody. And basically tell them like, hey, we're blowing on this program. Like if we have some people kind of like Valerie Wolf's, we need blindly corroborating information. If you have some people that are comfortable to give information, like let's get this together. Okay. So we start building this up, again, on the back end, like all the serious information, like, that exposes assets and like, could really cause harm. Like we're approaching this on the back end through what I understand are white hat channels and actually trying to like fight some of this weird globalist shit who again, these globalists are the ones that are making assets and inserting them into every aspect of American society. Okay.
Right.
So now here's the thing is I had deprogrammed when I was in solitary and stuff. But the thing is that I had never really went to the professional dissociative trauma therapy. Not yet, not at this point. And what happened is the one part that I had not recovered because so much of my personality had merged and all this. But what happened was there was still a deep, deep part, the original one from the morticians that was the globalist underlying access code that they had been using to backdoor the whole time. And what ended up happening was I woke up in the middle of the night on the phone out of nowhere. And what had happened was they were ordering me with an activation code to kill myself.
Holy shit. And these people on the phone were the morticians talking to you?
No, it was not the morticians. It was not the morticians.
Are you able to
That's
say
the
who
Omega
it was?
training, isn't it?
I do not know who it was. It was just the activation
Okay,
code.
it's just somebody got you.
Yes.
That's that deep-seated Omega phase of their programming, right? The Omega programming.
What were they-
Exactly.
Code green.
Omega's passive and active. There are certain protocols to where it will automatically happen, which is kind of like by, if you remember all the flooding and stuff, and a lot of people just do it, right? But if you're breaking programming or get through it, they do have like hardwired activation to where like you've been trained and like, you know, believe you have to do this to preserve honor. You believe you have to do this to save your family, all this. If it goes there, like, you know, what happens is, you know, you flash back to the programming session and believe like it's in everybody's best interest to do this. It's just like so hardwired in there through the most intense scenario. Again, they're stimulating your brain in the Weirnix area for the post-hypnotic suggestion. They stimulate your temporal lobe. This is put in with what used to be called the Stanley Corin, the God helmet. This is, so hardwired Omega programming. Yes, and so they had ordered this. And I want to be clear, I woke up on the phone, I had called them, okay? There, you know, it was hardwired in there and there was numbers to call, and I had called them. So anyways, this happens, you know, I woke up in it and became conscious and knew what had just happened, and like instantly, again, it's like a light switch, and that part clicked on. And
Do you remember what they were saying to you on the phone?
it was the Omega activation sequence. That was it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just a code. Okay.
Yeah. It was a layered code. Yeah.
Okay.
So I wake up in the middle of that. You know, I try to get it on my phone. My phone instantly overheats and is like fucked. I couldn't even end up recovering data from it, all that. Like literally broke my phone remotely, got super hot in my hand, all this. So as soon as this happens, I say, oh, fuck, I'm fucked. You know, I had just been moving in my new girlfriend there to one of the 3 houses down from there because I had 4 total. And I tell her, like, you can't stay here anymore, right? There was someone else I had on the property. I, you know, told them they had to go. You know, basically, like, oh shit. I'm like, do I shut down? Do I not? Do I shut down? You know, I'm not sure exactly what to do. The next day, what happens is I get a visit. Executive model Lincoln Town car comes all the way up those driveways, and they step out. And they step out with a Jehovah's Witness pamphlet. And it's 2 men, but I'm not going to... No, it's 2 men. And they step out with a Jehovah's Witness pamphlet and tell me, you know, talk about that, you know, they want me to come work for counterterrorism.
Mm-hmm.
And they flash the Jehovah's Witness packet and try to come in. And, you know, essentially, one, I'm like, okay, are they arrested? Like, what the fuck's going on? Like, you know, it's bad news. But I was like, you know, they had a briefcase, they had this, like, I wanted to make a move, but it was also like, you know, they were both also armed, and I was, you know, back there, and like, it was, you know, not going to go good if I tried something. So I asked them to leave the property, and they did leave the property, surprisingly. Okay. The next few days, there was, you know, calls, there was attempts, there's different activation ways they can activate you, including microwave weaponry that puts voices and stuff like this. What they were doing was I would get the voices of activation codes, which I had uncompartmented by then, and I was aware of it. You know, I was getting you know, heart palpitations, like I was obviously getting hit with some directed energy stuff. All this, I'm like, oh fuck, I got to shut down. It was like maybe 2 days after this, and what happens is they literally in broad daylight come out in an MH6 in a Little Bird, okay? And are hanging out, and I'm like, what the fuck are they going to do? And they blast me with some frequency device that completely incapacitates me, completely fucked up. And like right after this happens, or as it happens, like, you know, the same guy's pulled back up, right? And, you know, then I'm tortured, interrogated, you know, very bad, left in a very bad way, okay? And I'm not even busted yet. I go to find my girlfriend. As soon as I go across the town, she was living in East Nashville. I go there. When I get to her house, I get in the door. I have a key because I also was renting a room in her house, and she was just moving out to one of those trailers I had there because I just got it. But anyways, she is passed out, and she says, I saw lights. She said, I saw lights. It was the aliens. It was the aliens. And I said, oh, fuck. And she was so sick, we had to end up taking her to the emergency room. You know, it ends up being like almost 2 days. She has encephalitis, to where her brain's swollen. She's incredibly sick, you know, and incredibly damaged, and starts telling me about how the aliens came and visit her and remembers the aliens from when she was young and all this. And essentially, I found out the hard way, holy fuck, she was programmed, and they just came, and I knew already what it was, is it's electronic dissolution of memory. And what they did was, unfortunately, she had been in a position, and, you know, they half fried her brain and regressed her into that state. Okay. While all this happened too, like the next day, what happened was I was pulling back up to my house, and what happens, of course, my house is being raided by the police. Okay. And I had all the notes. I had a bunch of notes that I had been taking for, you know, from some of this activity where we were gathering stuff from local people affiliated with some of this, you know, to where we were building up cases and so on and so forth for, you know, cooperating information and the people that were like assets locally in Nashville. You know, they had seized all that, tore it up, arrested me. I bond out. Here's the thing is, somehow they had only raided one of my houses when I had 4 right there in the circle, right? They had only raided one of my houses. And the others were still there. And my next door neighbor, who was the Special Forces pilot, who had told me basically that his son was saying the same programming stuff. As this all happened, it forced a conversation with the Special Forces pilot, who told me his son had told him all about this stuff, and that he didn't believe him then, and his son had killed himself. Okay? Yeah. And then at this whole time, I was still under deep mind control, and there was a black helicopter that was disassembled across the property line behind some trees that I was so fucking stupid I had never looked there. Yes. And this is what the Tennessee president of the motorcycle club Special Forces pilot showed me. And I said, holy fucking shit. And he's like, is it about this? You know what I'm saying? So like, the doctor was obviously one of their assets. The dirty news is that the doctor was an obstetrician. He had a husband-wife combo where they were obstetricians and OBGYNs. And they were handling some of the off-books breeding things and doing heinous things, and they had their own little asset that they were programming out there as well, which is what this lady had alluded to. It was
What
fucking
are their
horrible.
names?
Their names are the Wingos.
Wingos.
Yes.
Jesus.
WINGO. Yes. And at this point, little Bobby, Helen Rose, the lady who had rented me these places, said she didn't want the doctor turning little Bobby into a monster like him. That's what they had told me.
Jesus, dude.
So, yeah. So, at that point, the same men that had came visit me when I was fucked up had a sit-down meeting and basically outlined some rules to where I could do this, I could do that. I had to shut the fuck up publicly. I was able to work with survivors individually, but, you know, I'm basically gave me a whole thing, talk about people are getting hurt because of me. They're fixing it on the back end. You know, I don't know what I'm involved with, blah, 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 the whole fucking thing, you know, had me sign some shit, et cetera, right? So essentially, you know, at that point, I stood down. I moved out of there. She sold the land to the doctor and has passed since. And I went out on my own for a while. I moved up north a little bit. And that's when I got professional help from dissociative trauma therapists, worked through the rest of it to make sure I didn't have any further underlying access, learned 10 times more about these systems and basically even more of how everything works, and, you know, became like an absolute expert as far as these, what they're called as deliberately designed systems, and really understanding every aspect of this. And worked through that for years, and started case working with individuals, still networking with trauma therapists, still networking with some of these operators and some of these operatives that are involved with this clandestine network, and just essentially building up the database of organized safety. No longer taking victim names or anything like that. All we were getting was perpetrator information, perpetrator locations, code names, you know, all the information about the perpetration, and started building that database greatly, again, on top of what we already had. So then I continued to do that. And I have one more part of this too, is while this all happened and the people around me, you have to realize I had a very small circle that included, like, you know, the Jester's son, my charge partners, that included all this. Every single one of them that talked, everybody in my circle close had disclosed major events in their childhood, missing memory. One went to juvenile for 6 months, had no memory of it, right? The other had a serious circumstances to where his grandfather died. Disclosed the horrible abuse from their own family. One of them was aware that he was programmed. One of them had started going to therapy, and then had lost control of his bodily functions. That's what his words. All these things, all the people close to me disclosed horrible stuff with their family, and that they too believe they have been programmed. Yeah.
Jesus,
that's how deep it was. And of course, these people were all, linked up with like the families that were like, bloodline. And the other thing is very interesting is the people very close, the Jester, right? That was land commissioner stealing the land that was, high up in all this. They were tied up. They were the Russell family. And the Russell family is the same bloodline that started Jehovah's Witnesses, Charles Taze Russell. So it's very interesting. It's the same bloodline, a very prominent bloodline, same bloodline, and same genealogy in the circles. And these people raise their young like this. They believe in it, and they believe it makes them stronger. They believe that it will keep up their dynasties, and they believe that, they just have to harden themselves. And they believe in world domination. These are people that are occultists, and they are family believers. And this is part of literal a fucking globalist plan to where they are generating mass sleeper assets. And a lot of the research and development they do on a lot of these random poor kids and expendable kids, the good methods that end up like building up, eventually going towards like transhumanism and stuff, is what they actually integrate and put in with their own families, and integrate some of this into like curriculum and into the advanced development programs through their private institutions that they run all their people through, right? But essentially it's, there's bloodlines and, that are really infiltrating all the elements of the government, and it's it's sick.
Who sits at the top of this?
So, there's like, you got the Dragon Society. There's a lot of overlap, but the Dragon Society is like, go up to like, okay, China has like White Dragon Society, but then there's also like Black Dragon. Like they play both sides within themselves, right? In the macro. Even goes into like Russia and some of these Eastern European places, stuff like this, and then like you have like the Jesuits, which is also throughout Europe and stuff like this, but like the Jesuits are up there very high, and they have been carrying out these sort of operations for a very long time, and insert their people everywhere. And the Jesuits obviously like control like the sovereign military order of Malta and all that. But so it's not just one person. This is compartmented and all that. But what it is it's the old orders and the old secret societies. Is whoever makes it to the top is the one that's running it, and it's kind of like a machine in and of itself, because if anybody drops out, there's other people that want that top spot already to fill it up, and everybody knows the rule, and it's automatic retribution. Do you see what I'm saying? So who's at the top of this? It's the people at the top of these secret societies, who obviously overlap with the people at the heads of government, and sometimes it gets fished out if it's not their guy, but it's almost everybody at that point is, because they have to go through these steps in order to get to the top spot. And to be clear, these people that are at the top of this for a long time have been communing, and this is, what they believe, with these spirits, okay? And, this is what they grew up in. It's a sick cycle that they continue, and these people are actually believers and go through these rituals and even use children to commune with spirits that give them orders, advice, intelligence. They think that they're controlling these spirits, just like, the magical circles to contain them, to do this. They're summoning, they're doing this. They think that they have it, but they too, who knows what's going on? Is this, imaginary weird brain shit, and they're just like off in some shit? My understanding is that you hear about this UAP hitchhiker effect and stuff like this. My understanding of this is that these people, through these invocations, right? Okay, you see people are controlled by gut biomes, and they're controlled by, and you see like parasites like from cat feces can alter your mind, right? They have these parasitic things that make insects go and control and all this. From what I understand is that there are parasitic forces that may be energetic or actually microscopic, also parasitic activity, and some of these sick activities build up these parasites, and there's like an energetic virus that actually affects through someone's neural activity, that maybe it makes the lizard brain take back over, that part of the brain, whatever it is. This occult pathwork in these practices alters their brain, and it appears to infect some of them with parasitic energetic viruses and parasitic consciousness that controls them. And one of the reasons that you hear about this bloodline and genealogy, just like with the parasites that pass on from the mother to the young, and then they're born with them. And it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And you hear about these bloodline ties, but there's actually, scientific evidence if you just look at normal parasitic activity of how this works. We see this much of a frequency spectrum that's this, and there's all sorts of consciousness and energy out there. And, it is of my belief and many people's belief, if you actually study or understand, whether you want to call it demonology, right? Whether you want to call it, magic, whether you want to call it, whatever, parasitology, right? There are forces out there. These people are tapping into energies and consciousnesses that assimilate in them and that, affect their thinking. And, it's a slippery slope once they start doing these moves anyways, and desensitize themselves. Do they need something like that to be a psychopath? I don't know. But what's ultimately controlling these things are, aside from the parasitic invocations that affect them if they do, is there are specific deities, specific things that these people commune with, and specific, whether they're taking hallucinogenics and all this, all that aside, there is specific rituals and ceremonies that evoke the same deity and the same experience, regardless of the person that's doing it. And multiple people can do it and experience the same thing. So it is a mass hallucination that's shared, or what? All I know is that the same practices that you hear from Babylonian times, the same practice with the Egyptian mysteries, the same cult of Mithras, the Mithriac mysteries with the Roman, the seven rites, and that they're, if you're familiar with the Mithriac mysteries, it's, they are united by the handshake. It's not just a handshake like a Masonic handshake. It is a handshake as in a communication protocol, right? Between the data transferring. It's a handshake to exchange information. And they go through these protocols within their brain to prepare it. And then like Enochian, just like John Dee, just like Jack Parsons, they use this systematic protocol to establish communication with non-human intelligence. Am I saying all non-human intelligence is demons? No, I'm saying it's an unlimited universe. And of course, there's all sorts of stuff, some physical, some not, some in the frequency range where you can visually see it, and some not. But these things, these people are communicating with specific deities, specific entities that they do in fact worship. And that is why we call it Luciferianism. And that is what is at the top of this. These people at the very top are communing with spirits that they do in fact purport to take orders from.
This sounds like, this is like Bohemian Grove, Bilderberg Group, like all this stuff is, you're getting way beyond anything I've ever like heard of or know of. Like I just have these like cursory surface level understandings or knowledge of these things. And, you know, these explanations are wild. I was taking notes here, like to ask, like next time I want you to get in a couple of these different things. Because I think this is a good spot to pause, so we can get into what you're doing now. And then I have some questions about some of these things too, that we can be more direct next time and get into, just being more like precision with some of these topics. And, yeah, I think this is a good spot to pause for now, and we'll reconvene again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for listening to part 2 here. Part 3 will probably be the last one, but if it's not, I mean, I know you guys aren't going to have a problem with it. So this has been incredibly enlightening, and no, I appreciate you guys for listening. And as always, just check out the sponsors in the show notes. You know, leave us comments. I mean, this is part 2, right? So if you're new to this and you've already listened to part 1, you know, and you have, it's not like we're not going to ever speak to Gray again. Like if you have questions or things like you know, want to know or how to get in touch with him, like we can do all of that. Like leave your comments on the video. So, but
For sure.
Yeah, with that being said, I hope you guys have a good night, and until next time.
Love you guys.